Chapter 12:21. The countdown ended. Pure Ice stomped her feet and elbowed Wuji. Wuji snickered, equipped himself with invincibility, and charged towards the ice-clear Jade Elite. Wuji was the most courageous person to play as a cleric to the warrior realm. Pure Ice reacted quickly. Seeing that Wuji had the invincibility buff on him, she knew that her attacks would not work. Thus, she leaped sideways and dodged Wuji's charge. I beg for mercy. With a loud roar, Wuji activated Martyrdom, and Pure Ice and Jade Beauty was involuntarily sucked in. Ha ha ha! Wuji laughed hysterically. He lowered his head and hugged Pure Ice's waist from behind. Then, he shouted excitedly, "Lady, I don't ask to live together, but I ask to die together. It's worth it." While shouting, Wuji activated the cleric's reckoning skill. Bang! It was just a face-to-face encounter. Before anyone could react, Pure Ice was blasted into a cloud of white light by Wuji. At the same time, Wuji's HP was reduced to a single drop. F***CK, this be *TCH, self-destructed. The audience sighed when they saw this. The cleric class was so shameless. Fortunately, it was a class with thin cloth armor, so its HP growth was not high. Even with all the stat points added, it was still mediocre. Otherwise, no one would be able to withstand being sucked in by this be *TCH and exploding. Seeing this, the Chuanjin students clenched their fists and said, F***CK, if I knew this would happen, I would have chosen the cleric class. I'm so envious that he can kill people in this position. Wuji killed Pure Ice and won another point for Chuanjin. The score was pulled back to 4-3. On the stage, Wuji continuously healed himself a few times to replenish his HP. At this time, the fourth player from Don't Cry Squad had already jumped onto the stage. The match began. The Grandmaster of Combat was afraid that Wuji would turn around and run away, so he made the first move and pounced on Wuji. However, Wuji calmly gave himself another invincible buff. Under the punches and kicks of the fighter, Wuji unhurriedly cast the flight technique and flew up leisurely. Come down. Facing Wuji, who had been sent flying into the sky, the young fighter awkwardly waved his fists and feet in the air with tears in his eyes. Then, he collapsed and knelt on the ground. Encountering Chuanjin, this group of simple-minded kung fu youths had a terrible gaming experience, and their love for this game was incomparably deep. 30 minutes later, the two of them left the battlefield in a draw. The motley crowd battle team was completely annihilated, and the Grandmaster of Combat, Don't Cry battle team was left with one member. With 1 point added, the score was pulled back to 4-4. During the intermission, everyone in Chuanjin gathered around Wuji and said, "It's a draw now. How are we going to play the third match?" Yeah. Evildoers Run Wild, who had not been waiting outside the gaming cabin, could not help but say, "Why don't you let me go? It's so boring waiting here alone." Hee. No need. Wuji chuckled. You're here to help. We, Chuanjin, have 11 combat members. We don't even have enough to fight ourselves. We can't let you go no matter what. We can do this. Fight like this? Will that work? Hearing Wuji's tactics, the crowd could not help but exclaim, no matter how good their defense is, it'll be a draw at most. They're not stupid. It's because they're not stupid. Wuji smirked. That's why they've already chosen their own graves. Everyone was speechless. At the same time, in the resting room of the Grandmaster of Combat, Don't Cry battle team, Crystal Jade was cheering everyone on. Everyone, keep your spirits up. We've already tied the score. Oh. Ji Shursan responded weakly. Although it was true that they had tied the score, after the battle, just now, the frustration in everyone's hearts was getting stronger. Crystal Jade continued, Everyone, give it your all in the next match. Let's try our best to turn the score around. TSK. Ji Shursan said unhappily. What if they run again? I don't want to play hide and seek with them anymore. Run? Ha! Crystal Jade laughed. The choice of the setting is in our hands. This time, they won't be able to run away. At this time, someone said, Sis, don't forget about that one guy. The setting is so small. If he attacks us, do you think we'll be able to escape? Are you stupid? Crystal Jade glanced at that person. As long as a few of us can stall that Wong guy for a few minutes, the rest of us will be able to wipe out the motley crew. When that happens, we'll fight 10 against 1. Even if we can't win, we won't be completely wiped out. Oh, hearing Crystal Jade's words, everyone revealed an expression of relief. Indeed, although Wang Yu was strong, everyone was also a martial artist. Even if they couldn't win, it wouldn't be hard for a few of them to stall Wang Yu. As for the rest of Chuanjin, they really didn't care about them. Thinking about this, everyone's eyes finally lit up with hope again. After the break time, everyone once again entered the gaming pods. It was the final match, and everyone was fully focused. For the third team match, other than to place one's pride, who couldn't defend and wasn't good at long-range attacks, all the other combat members from Chuanjin went up. At this time, Pure Ice and Jade had also chosen their location. The venue was simple. It was still a fighting ring. It seemed that this group of young fighters had been traumatized by Chuanjin. They didn't even dare to choose a bigger map for the team match. This group of people from Chuanjin had harmed a group of upright youths to this extent. They were the epitome of evil. Both teams went up. Chuanjin and Crystal Jade's group of Grandmasters of Combat were sent to the arena at the same time. On Chuanjin's side, there were men and women, young and old, tall and short, fat and thin, good-looking and ugly, mages and warriors, all kinds of shapes and colors, a group of strange shapes and sizes. On the other hand, Crystal Jade's group of Grandmasters of Combat lined up in a row. In comparison, they looked a lot more majestic. Neatly arranged, it always gave people a sense of shock. In fact, the audience knew that in terms of real strength, there were only a few that Chuanjin could fight. After a few matches, Chuanjin's style had been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Not to mention, there were really a lot of hardcore people who liked Chuanjin's shameless style. As the saying goes, the yellow fox or the black fox, the one who gets the mouse is the king. No matter what methods he used, it was reasonable to win. For a moment, the audience who originally supported the Grandmasters of Combat, Don't Cry team, actually began to split up among the supporters of both sides. The countdown ended, and the match began. Crystal Jade gave Jishir-san and Yin Luyin a look. Both of them immediately looked over at Wang Yu. However, when the two of them saw Chuanjin's formation, they were immediately stunned. PSO, I went for a drink yesterday. I'm really tired today. I'm really sorry that I only have one chapter today. Chapter 1222. Naturally, Chuanjin was not the kind of people who would fight head-on, even though they knew they were no match for their opponent. As soon as they entered the arena, Chuanjin immediately split into two layers and stood in a circle. Wang Yu, Yinlao, Air, Bao San, and two assassins stood on the periphery, blocking Wuji, Chun Xiang, and the other long-range professions behind them. It had to be said that Wuji had superhuman leadership skills when it came to arranging troops. Currently, the 10 of them were intertwined in an offensive and defensive formation. Moreover, because it was a circular formation, the range of the formation was greatly reduced. The bows and magic staffs that extended from the frontline professions gave off a feeling that there was nowhere to attack. Icy Clear Jade and the others had wanted to divide Chuanjin and devour them, but they did not expect Chuanjin to not play by the rules and not give them a chance at all. As the match began, Chuanjin quickly occupied the center of the arena. Jishir-san and Yin Luyin exchanged glances and immediately charged at Wang Yu, attempting to drag Wang Yu away according to plan. However, just as the two rushed in front of Wang Yu, a black circle appeared under Chuanjin's feet. Immediately after, a dark barrier rose and surrounded all of Chuanjin's members. F***CK. Jishir-san and Yin Luyin were shocked and hurriedly retreated. Unfortunately, the person standing in front of them was none other than Wang Yu. These two had spent a lot of effort to drag Wang Yu away, but Wang Yu dragged them away with ease. Wang Yu let out a low grunt, his arms expanding and reaching forward through the dark barrier. He grabbed Jishir-san and Yin Luyin with each hand and pulled them back. Bang! The two of them were forcefully dragged by Wang Yu into the dark boundary and were then fixed on the spot. These two were no match for Wang Yu unless they were fixed. Now that they were fixed, Wang Yu naturally had no reason to let them go. He raised his hand and punched. Two rays of white light rose. In less than a minute, Chuanjin had obtained 2 points. This, seeing Ji San and Yin Liyun's miserable state, Clear Ice and the others were dumbfounded. Meow. So darkness barrier could be used as a defensive barrier as well. The dark barrier had a long immobilizing effect. Moreover, the people Chuanjin was standing at the outermost perimeter of the barrier were all ruthless people. If they were immobilized, there would only be one outcome: death. He had seen people waiting for their prey, but he had never seen someone so blatantly waiting for their prey. Fortunately, the duration of the darkness barrier was only 8 seconds. When the darkness barrier disappeared, Long Zishue's figure flashed and rushed in the direction of Ming Jianshui, planning to take advantage of the situation and enter. Chun Xiang chuckled and tapped his staff on the ground. Thorns rose from the feet of Chuanjin's people. In a moment of desperation, Yin Lao Air, who was next to Ming Jian Daoxue, smashed his tower's shield onto the ground. He stuck out his middle finger from behind the shield and shouted, "Bastard!" Long Zishue was involuntarily sucked into Yin Lao Air's shield. At the same time, Ming Jian Daoxue raised his sword and ended Long Zishue's life. "Ha ha ha!" Wu Ji laughed and taunted Clear Ice. "Come at me if you want. If you can make it back alive, it's my loss." Hearing this, Clear Ice's face instantly turned frosty. It couldn't be helped. Clear Ice and the others were all grandmasters of combat. They were all close combat classes. With Chun Xiang's strong control, close combat classes had no way of surviving. Charging forward was definitely an act of suicide. After hesitating for a moment, Clear Ice ordered the others, "Everyone back off and act according to the situation." After receiving Clear Ice's order, the other grandmasters of combat all pushed to the edge of the ring. At this time, Wu Ji began to mock them again. "Do you think you'll be fine if you back off?" As he said that, Chun Xiang gripped his staff tightly and silently chanted Toxic Nova. Whoosh! A circle of poisonous fog floated in all directions. The ring was small to begin with. Under the restrictions of the venue, Chun Xiang's Toxic Nova became a full-screen ultimate skill. The Grandmasters of Combat could not dodge in time and were all poisoned. Their bodies were filled with the aura of forgiveness. Every one of them looked sickly, and their movement speed was significantly reduced. At this time, the 3 long-range classes, Mingdu, Yangna, and Exquisite Dream, began to attack the Grandmasters of Combat opposite them. Xuanjin's group was standing in the center of the ring. With the attack range of the long-range classes standing in this position, the attack range could cover any corner of the ring. In other words, the Grandmasters of Combat, don't cry, had nowhere to hide, especially now that most of them were poisoned by Chun Xiang. Their movements were as slow as zombies. The reason why these Grandmasters of Combat could fight was because they could jump up and down. They were not just a little bit stronger than the others. Now that their biggest advantage had been taken away, they had completely become moving targets in the eyes of Chuanjin's group. Even close combat classes like Bao San and Yin Laoer had all pulled out their guns and started shooting at the Grandmasters of Combat. The Grandmasters of Combat were sullen. How they wanted to go up and beat their opponents to death. Unfortunately, these guys' arms were too short. If they fought in close combat, they would be controlled. They could only stand on the spot and let their opponents hit them. The biggest resistance they could do was to struggle for their lives. Watching her subordinates being killed by Chuanjin one by one, Pure Ice felt an unprecedented sense of defeat. Originally, she wanted to rely on the terrain to kill all of Chuanjin's players. In the end, she was tortured to death by the opponent's use of the terrain if there were long-range classes on her side. If the setting wasn't the ring, various scenarios floated through Pure Ice's mind. In the end, she still returned to reality. Sigh. The defeated Pure Ice Jade sighed and finally chose to surrender. System notification. Motley Crowd Battle Team defeated the Grandmasters of Combat Don't Cry Battle Team 14-4 and became the champion of this amateur competition. At the same time, they have obtained the qualification to compete in the professional competition. The result of the competition was absolutely unexpected. No one in the audience would have thought that this group of shameless fellows from Chuanjin would really rely on shamelessness to the end. They defeated the superhuman grandmasters of combat, Don't Cry Battle Team, and became the biggest winner of this competition. However, the professional level players weren't too surprised. This was because, like Wuji, they had long seen through the weakness of the grandmasters of combat, Don't Cry Battle Team. First of all, this team had a problem with their configuration. All of them were grandmasters of combat. In terms of lineup, they lost by half. Secondly, this team had a problem with their mentality. They thought that as long as they were strong, they would definitely be able to defeat their opponents. Even if this kind of team could fight their way into the professional competition, they wouldn't be able to last one round before being eliminated. Next up was the award ceremony. Under the boos of the audience, the group from Chuanjin and the second and third place teams walked up to the stage. After a nonsensical speech, the host excitedly raised the microphone and asked Captain Wang Yu, "Captain Tai, did the result of this competition exceed your expectations?" Wang Yu was stunned for a moment before saying, "No. With our strength, winning the championship was within our expectations." Chapter 1223. Championship, Ba. Hearing Wang Yu's words, the audience raised their middle fingers in unison. What a bunch of shameless bastards. They only relied on crafty schemes to accidentally enter the professional competition group. Do they really think that professional experts were just there to eat rice? The despicable methods you guys are using are all leftovers from the pro players back in the day. A bunch of shameless bastards. In the gaming circle, professional leagues still attracted a lot of attention. After all, professional players did not usually show their faces. They only showed their faces during professional leagues. Not all players had the capital to watch the game live, so every time there was a professional league, the players in the game would stay in front of the computer to watch the live broadcast. This was the power of idols. Now, in the game, every main city had a public arena. In the holographic mode, there was not much difference between watching the game in the public arena and watching it live. Of course, as a company that created games with all its heart, Longting Company would naturally not give up this opportunity to make money. Tickets to the public arena were also required, but compared to the high ticket prices in the live arena, it was much cheaper. But the players did not think so. Since everyone paid to watch the live broadcast, the competition team should at least let them get their tickets back. The shameless bastards of Chuanjin not only affected the game experience of their opponents, but also seriously affected the audience's viewing experience. As soon as the game was over, everyone clamored for a refund from Longting Company. As the saying went, the final right of explanation belonged to Longting Company. Naturally, it was impossible for them to refund the money. They just wanted to tell everyone that the result of the game had something to do with the organizer, so the players made a fuss on the forum. As the initiator, Chuanjin also became the target of public criticism. Overnight, Chuanjin became popular in the major game boards of Rebirth. Even the players who used to play online games as single-player games had heard of the notoriety of Chuanjin. Of course, the people of Chuanjin did not care about these false reputations. At this time, they had won the championship of the amateur group and were invited by Comrade Old Cow to eat together. Not only the martial arts legends, but also the group of Pure Ice and Pure Jade, who had been humiliated by Chuanjin today. 50 to 60 people sat together. It was a very strange scene. Old Cow's intention was very simple. He wanted to treat everyone to a meal. Other than celebrating Chuanjin's first championship, the most important thing was to let Crystal Pure Jade and the others sit down and get to know Wang Yu and the others, and not to worry about today's competition. Confucius once said, "Are you still young if you are not frivolous?" After all, they were all hot-blooded youngsters from martial arts families. If they suffered losses in the arena, it was inevitable that they would make up for it outside the arena. Wang Yu wasn't afraid, but Wang Yu's friends were just a bunch of weak, ordinary people without the protection of the game. Everyone ate together and talked things over. They were all friends in the future, so naturally, there wouldn't be any accidents. Actually, Clear Ice, Clear Jade, and Nian Lian all came from big clans and received good education. Although they were proud and aloof, they weren't insensible people. They accepted their loss this time and didn't have any other thoughts. Now, with Wang Yu and his father, the two future leaders of the Kung Fu Circle, making peace, even if they couldn't calm their resentment, they immediately expressed their stance. As for the others, such as Ji San, who had evil intentions, of course, didn't dare to provoke the Wang family, a leading force in the Kung Fu Circle, so they could only swallow their anger. After the meal, everyone shook hands and made peace. The worries of the Chuanjin people also dissipated. It couldn't be helped. No matter how fiercely the online players shouted, the keyboard warriors only dared to speak up. But for this group of people who played Kung Fu, no one had any confidence. It was already late at night when they returned to the hotel. It was raining outside. The rainy night in Linhai City was very beautiful. Wang Yu stood in front of the window, hugging Mu Zixian's waist. He looked at the outside world through the glass, and his heart was full of emotions. A year ago, when Wang Yu left home, it was also raining in this season. The difference was that at that time, Wang Yu was still a canary that had just been released from the cage. He didn't need to worry about survival, and he didn't have the slightest bit of freedom. Wang Yu's heart was at a loss, and he felt lost in life. In this year, Wang Yu had tasted too much pain, and he also gained a lot of emotions. Friendship, love, family, all of these were never contradictory. Everything depended on one's own efforts. Especially Mu Zixian, who taught Wang Yu how to survive, taught Wang Yu how to love others, and taught Wang Yu how to adapt to this prosperous and strange world. Perhaps in the near future, Wang Yu would return home and become the successor. But at that time, even if his life trajectory was the same as before, Wang Yu wouldn't be the canary of the past. A bird should look to the sky, shouldn't it? It's been a year, Wang Yu said lightly. Yes, it's been a year. Mu Zixian smiled, her face filled with happiness. Watching a boy who didn't even know how to survive become a man of indomitable spirit, there was nothing more satisfying than this. Thank you, Wang Yu said softly. Thank you too. Mu Zixian hugged Wang Yu tightly. Actually, I really wanted to write the words at the end of the story here, but the story wasn't finished yet. It wasn't my style to leave it unfinished. Of course, more importantly, I didn't want people to misunderstand me as a blade smuggler. It was still raining. Rainy days always made people fall into a deep sleep. The sun came out, and the entire world seemed to have been washed, giving off a fragrant scent. When I came to the arena again, there were many more spectators than the previous 2 days. This was to be expected. The previous 2 days were amateur matches. Everyone could just watch the live streaming game. Spending money to watch the amateur matches was a waste of money. Reality proved that these people had great foresight. At this time, the spectator stands were filled with support groups from various teams. Banners were unfurled, and it was a spectacular sight. Society, my brother X, doesn't say much. Brothers from all corners of the world. Always wins after 100 battles. The slogans of the fans behind the various teams were also dazzling to look at. The professional fans and the support groups for amateurs were of a completely different dimension. Wang Yu and the others were dumbfounded. Awesome, awesome. Society, society. The group of people wiped their cold sweat and entered the arena. Seeing Chuanjin's people enter, someone in the arena shouted, "Chuanjin, get out of the gaming circle. Motley Crew, get out of the pro scene." At first, there were only a few people, but then more and more people shouted. In the end, tens of thousands of people shouted in unison. The scene was deafening, and the shouts made Chuanjin's people feel smug, their hearts filled with pride. Chapter 1225. At this moment, the MC introduced, "The next player from Bloody Battle Team is indifferent to fame and fortune." Indifferent to fame and fortune. As the judge announced this name, the players in the audience were stunned. Then, they became excited and the entire arena was filled with exclamations. "It's her." The people from Chuanjin were also slightly shocked. Wuji said calmly, "Looks like Bloody Battle Team is going all out this time." "Who is this?" Wang Yu asked with a dumbfounded face. Ever since he came to this arena, Wang Yu did not know any of the so-called experts. Wu Ji said, indifferent to fame and fortune, tranquil Ziyuan. Have you heard of them? Yes, it's from Zhuge. I've learned it before, Wang Yu replied. Wu Ji was speechless. The two I mentioned are names. The one we saw with Dugu Juqiang a few days ago is called Tranquil Ziyuan. This person is indifferent to fame and fortune. Tranquil Ziyuan. Wang Yu thought for a while and said, is he the god of war? Yes. Wu Ji nodded. Could this person be the god of war? Wang Yu asked again. That's right. At this moment, Mingdu came over and said excitedly, she is the legendary god of war. She is my idol. I see. Wang Yu came to a realization. The players in the gaming circle always like to call those who are strong as gods. However, ordinary experts would only show their talents in a certain game. After all, it was only a flash in the pan. When they moved to other games, they would be replaced by new experts. Only the so-called god of war and the god of war stood at the top of the gaming world. No one had ever shaken them. One had to know that there were no fixed conditions to become an expert in the game. For example, Wang Yu was invincible in holographic mode. If he switched to mouse mode, he could probably find anyone to beat him up. Even the experts in LOL could only show off in PlayerUnknown's Battleground. However, these two people could be considered top-notch experts no matter which field or game they were in. It could be seen that their overall qualities were terrifyingly high. She was the benchmark of the industry. It was no wonder that even the people of Chuanjin were shocked when they heard her name. In the arena, the competition had already begun. Indifferent to fame and fortune, Xiaochun looked at Lei Gongdang indifferently. He narrowed his eyes and asked, are you going to admit defeat, or do you want me to do it? Mages were a natural counter to warriors, especially the cumbersome shield warriors. Despite having a body full of defense and HP, mages were nothing more than live targets against high-damage classes. Lei Gongzhuang met someone who was indifferent to fame and fortune. It could be said that he had met his nemesis. However, no matter what, Lei Gongfang was an expert who had been famous for a long time. Even if his opponent was an expert who was indifferent to fame and fortune, he couldn't possibly not even dare to draw his sword. Mocked by indifferent to fame and fortune, the Thunder God Lord's face darkened, and he charged toward indifferent to fame and fortune. At this moment, the God of Thunder was using his signature move, the double sky chasing slash. As long as one was hit by him, they would either die or die miserably. You overestimate yourself. Indifferent to fame and fortune smiled and pointed forward with his left hand. A blue light flew toward the Thunder God Lord. The Thunder God Lord hurriedly raised his shield to block the blue light. Crash! The sound of glass shattering rang out. The advancing Thunder God Lord was instantly frozen into an ice sculpture by the blue light. At the same time, a line of words floated above Indifferent's head. Awakening, frozen seal. What a powerful magic priority. Seeing this scene, Wu Ji couldn't help but furrow his brows. In Rebirth, the main factor that affected a skill's priority was strength. As such, warriors and knights had the highest priority out of all the classes. On the other hand, ranged classes had relatively lower priority. This was especially true for the warrior's charge skill. Although it was a low-level skill, its priority was one of the highest among all warrior skills. Indifferent to fame and fortune, a mage had casually sealed a tank like the Thunder God Lord with a finger. This priority was truly shocking. After sealing the Thunder God Lord in ice, Indifferent to fame and fortune sneered. The magic in her right hand had already finished gathering. With a wave of her hand, a huge rock fell from the sky and smashed into the Thunder God Lord. Boom! With a loud noise, the Thunder God Lord sculpture was smashed into pieces. It turned into a white light and flew out of the arena. In an instant, the audience was silent. Instant kill. The number 1 shield warrior on the server was actually insta-killed. This damage was simply interesting. Wang Yu rubbed his chin and recalled the 2 skills that Indifferent to fame and fortune had just used. He had a playful smile on his face. The Thunder God Lord was one of the strongest in the Sky Dragon team, other than Nin Jing Ziyuan. If even he was insta-killed, Then the players behind him couldn't even withstand a single blow. In the next few matches, the Sky Dragon team's players were all defeated by indifferent to fame and fortune. There was no one who could last a single round. It couldn't be helped. Not only was indifferent to fame and fortune's damage shocking, but her prediction was also unheard of. No matter how the opponent tried to dodge, they couldn't avoid her skills. Even Chun Xiangmingdu, a master of prediction, couldn't help but be speechless. The audience couldn't help but exclaim, "Is there no one who can deal with her?" A lady had consecutively challenged 4 experts from the Sky Dragon battle team, and there was even existence like Lei Gongding. Although there was no gender distinction in the game, seeing a lady like Hua Xiong from the Sishui Pass instantly killing all the challengers, the audience felt a little disappointed. After all, in most people's hearts, women playing games were always weaker than men. Of course, the reason why the people from Chuanjin said this was because they had placed huge bets on the Sky Dragon team to win. The sudden appearance of such a person from the Bloody team caught everyone off guard. Yes, Wuji looked at the Chuanjin people, who were filled with indignation, and said, "Isn't Old Bull just one? No sh*t." Everyone said angrily, "If Old Cow could go, would we be in such a rush?" Hee hee. Seeing these guys scratching their heads, Wuji smiled and said, "That depends on whether or not Ning Jingziyuan is lucky enough to go up on stage. Although I don't know who's stronger between the two of them. Since they're both famous, they can't just go up there and be instantly killed. What are you waiting for? Pray." When the old superstitious Chun Xiang heard this, he rolled his eyes at everyone and drew a cross in front of his chest. Then he clasped his hands together and started chanting, "Sage Confucius, Taoist ancestor, bless me, Amiba." The others followed suit and closed their eyes. It had to be said that Chun Xiang, that old fellow, had some skill. Just as the few of them were muttering to themselves, the 5th member of the Sky Dragon battle team had already been chosen. The host looked at the player who was about to go up, and his expression froze. Then he shouted excitedly, "The exciting moment is here. The next player from the Sky Dragon team is Ning Jingziyuan." Chapter 12:26. God of War, Tranquil Ziyuan. The audience went into an uproar again when they heard this name. It was a professional league after all, and it always brought all kinds of surprises. Who would have thought that not only would the mage god be invited, but the god of war would also be invited? Who was stronger between the god of war and the mage god? This was an unsolved mystery in the hearts of all the veteran players. However, it was obvious that the relationship between the two experts was not ordinary just by looking at their names. In all these years, the players had never heard of either of them defeating the other. There were many inferences on the forum, but everyone had their own bias when it came to who was stronger and who was weaker. Inferences without evidence would only cause a fight. That was why many veteran players dreamed of a real fight between the two legendary experts. Who would have thought that their dreams would come true in this arena today? Aya. Wang Yu saw Tranquil Ziyuan on the stage and said in surprise, "Isn't that him? Who is it?" Swoosh. As soon as Wang Yu said this, the surrounding audience immediately looked over, their eyes filled with anger. "The god of war, Tranquil Ziyuan. We met a few days ago." Seeing the murderous gazes from the surrounding audience, everyone was speechless. "Old Cow, can you not be like this? You make it sound like we're not humble at all." "Oh." Wang Yu ignored the crowd's gaze and said to himself, "Oh, yes, it's him. He really wanted to challenge me. He's very courageous." The Chuanjin people were speechless for a moment, then hurriedly explained to the audience, "We don't know him." In the arena, the match had already begun. However, the two of them did not attack immediately. Indifferent to fame and fortune stared coldly at Tranquil Ziyuan. "You dare to fight me?" "Ming, don't misunderstand," Tranquil Ziyuan said anxiously. "I'm doing this for money." "Oomph." Indifferent to fame and fortune snorted coldly. "Doing this for money? I think you've been bewitched by that vixen." Hearing indifferent to fame and fortune, the audience instantly quieted down. Oh my God, there was actually an unexpected reward from watching a match. F***, there's gossip. Wang Yu stared at the two of them with a gossipy expression, his ears perked up. Tranquil Ziyuan broke down. Ming, this is a live broadcast. Indifferent to fame and fortune, he waved the staff in his hand and said coldly, since that's the case, let's cut the crap and see who's stronger. As he spoke, he raised his left hand, and the ice seal flew straight towards Ning Jing Ziyuan. Ning Jing Ziyuan's face tightened. She gripped the hilt of her sword with both hands and swung it. A do chi slash shot out from her sword and hit the ice seal. Crash! A soft sound echoed as the ice seal collided with the battle chi chop, freezing the battle chi chop into a crescent moon shape. However, the ice seal was also blocked, just as Ningjing Ziyuan unleashed her combat aura slash. Indifferent finished gathering magic in his right hand. He raised his staff, and a lightning bolt as thick as a bucket descended from the sky towards Ningjing Ziyuan. Ningjing Ziyuan was still stunned by do chi slash, so it was too late for him to dodge. Seeing that he was about to be hit by indifferent to fame and fortune's violent lightning, Ningjing Ziyuan didn't put away his sword. Instead, he used the momentum and used Rising Dragon Slash. Rising Dragon Slash was a ground-to-air skill, so when he used it, he needed to jump a little bit forward. Therefore, there was a short distance of movement. However, this short distance was just enough to dodge the violent lightning spell. Wow! The audience was fascinated by such a spectacular dodge skill. Amazing! Even Wang Yu was surprised to see Ningjing Ziyuan use Rising Dragon Slash to dodge the skill at the crucial moment. In Rebirth, melee classes, especially warriors, had a long cooldown and cooldown. However, players could perform combo attacks according to the way they used their skills. This way, they could cancel the cooldown of the previous skill and the cooldown of the next skill. For example, Charge followed by Whirlwind Slash used this principle. Do Chi Slash followed by Rising Dragon Slash wasn't a very high level of skill. However, to be able to use Rising Dragon Slash to dodge the attack at such a short distance was definitely an instinctive reaction. For a player to be able to make such a reaction was basically the same as a boxing expert like Wang Yu. His body could instinctively parry other people's attacks. It was an extremely high level of skill. To be able to reach this level of skill in the game was an eye-opener for Wang Yu. As expected of the legendary god of war, he had some skill. Seeing Ningjing Ziyuan fly into the air, Indifferent Fame and Fortune pointed his staff at the ground and cast an ice mirror under Ningjing Ziyuan's feet. As long as Ningjing Ziyuan landed, he would definitely be frozen. However, Ningjing Ziyuan seemed to have expected Indifferent Fame and Fortune to have such a move. He grabbed his sword with both hands in mid-air, pointed the blade downwards, and immediately released a Collapsing Mountain. Collapsing Mountain had a 500-meter displacement range, and Indifferent Fame and Fortune were only this distance apart. Ningjing Ziyuan passed through the ice mirror under his feet and smashed towards Indifferent Fame and Fortune. Boom! Ningjing Ziyuan landed on the ground. Indifferent Fame and Fortune had already floated backwards like a feather. At the same time, a strange magic circle appeared under Ningjing Ziyuan's feet. Prison Circle. Ningjing Ziyuan frowned when he saw this. Without saying a word, he buried his head and charged towards Indifferent Fame and Fortune. At this time, Indifferent Fame and Fortune was already at the edge of the ring. He could not retreat, so he flashed behind Ningjing Ziyuan and raised his hand to attack. However, Ningjing Ziyuan spread his arms and used a Whirlwind Slash, strangling Indifferent Fame and Fortune. At the critical moment, a blue protective shield that looked like an eggshell enveloped Indifferent Fame and Fortune. Magic Shield. Bang, bang, bang. Ningjing Ziyuan's giant sword continuously smashed onto Indifferent Fame and Fortune's magic shield, making soul-stirring sounds. Crash! Finally, after Ningjing Ziyuan's Whirlwind Slash, the eggshell on Indifferent Fame and Fortune was also shattered by Ningjing Ziyuan's attack. Ningjing Ziyuan raised his sword and smashed it towards Indifferent Fame and Fortune's neck. Indifferent Fame pulled his hands, and a green light blocked Ningjing Ziyuan's attack. He himself also floated backwards a few meters, once again increasing the distance between him and Ningjing Ziyuan. The audience was silent. What was a battle between experts? What was a battle between gods? The performance of the two people on the ring was absolutely incisive. Indifferent Fame and Ningjing Ziyuan had only fought for a few rounds, but it could be said that danger was everywhere on the ring. Both of them were top-tier experts, and both had the ability to kill each other in an instant. In the battle just now, if either of them had reacted half a beat slower, it was very likely that the other party would have found an opening and taken care of him with a set of skills. Although the battle between Wang Yu and Pure Ice Jade was also very intense, playing Kung Fu and playing a game was still worlds apart. Everyone watching the battle between Wang Yu and Indifferent Fame and Cold Jade was purely for the entertainment. They could not experience it themselves. Chapter 12:27. In the end, this was a battle between pro players. Compared to the amateur team, it was much higher, especially the shameless tactics of a certain team. In comparison, this was what a true match should be like. Just as everyone was exclaiming about the strength of the two on stage and looking down on Xuanzhen's group, Indifferent Fame and Fortune glared at Ningjing Ziyuan. "Are you really going to fight me?" Ningjing Ziyuan hesitated. "Since I'm on stage, I have another identity. I have to give it my all and fight to the end. This is my responsibility and my duty." "Then do your duty." Indifferent Fame and Fortune angrily put away his staff and jumped off the stage. Only Ningjing Ziyuan was left with a stunned expression. Seeing this scene, everyone had a surprised expression on their faces. "That's it? No matter what, we have to find a winner." "That's right. Giving up in the middle of a fight? This is no different from writing a bad ending." All of a sudden, the audience started discussing unhappily. Wuji sighed. "Women really aren't suited for competitions. What did you say?" Yang Na, an exquisite dream, glared at Wuji angrily. Wuji hurriedly said, "I'm talking about a woman who doesn't care about fame and fortune. She's too emotional and always brings her emotions into the competition. Such a person is like a ticking time bomb. She might be powerful, but it's hard to say who she will bomb. As for you guys are different from her." Hearing Wuji's explanation, Yang Na and Exquisite Dream were satisfied. Wang Yu came over from the side and said, "You mean they're not women? Is that so?" Yang Na and Yang Na's faces darkened as they each pulled on one of Wuji's ears. Wuji wailed, "Stupid cow, what grudge do I have with you?" Indifferent Fame and Fortune left in the midfield. Bloody Team completely lost their last bit of hope. Originally, Bloody Team was already heavily injured. Now that they were up against Sky Dragon, it was easy to imagine what would happen if they lost their last bit of support. Even in the last team battle, they couldn't salvage anything. With experts like Lei Gongdai and Ningjing Ziyuan, the Sky Dragon team easily crushed the Blood Red team into a pile. The people from Blood Red War Flag were sent home in the first round. The audience was the most pitiful. The odds were 1-2. Everyone was ruthlessly cheated by this group of fellows. Only Xuanzhen's group was very excited. They said happily, "Old Qi is really a good brother. In order to make money for us, he lost so badly. When I see him next time, I must treat him to a drink. There's no need to reschedule. Let's just finish the competition today." At that moment, a familiar voice rang out from behind the Xuanzhen team. Everyone quickly turned around and saw Blood Red War Flag standing behind them with a lonely expression. However, his mood was not as bad as they had imagined. Come. Old Qi, take a seat." To place one's pride, a sensible child, it was not easy for him to win once, so he was in a good mood. He quickly moved his butt to the side and let Blood Red War Flag sit down. Blood Red War Flag did not stand on ceremony and casually sat in the middle of the Xuanzhen people. "What do you think? Did you earn a lot?" Blood Red War Flag asked everyone with a smile. Although the Xuanzhen people were shameless, they were still very loyal. In such a situation, it was not good enough to bet on Blood Red to lose. Hearing Blood Red War Flag's question, they immediately laughed awkwardly. "Ha. No, we actually bet on you to win too." "Ha." Blood Red War Flag laughed. All right. Do you think I don't know you guys? We all know the situation of our team. Even if it was me, I wouldn't bet on myself to win. Then how much did you bet?" Wuji asked with a smile. Blood-red war flag laughed sinisterly. Hee, I'm the one who opened the bet. What do you think? The Chuanjin people were stunned for a moment, then sighed. You've learned bad things. To minimize the losses. Didn't I learn this from you? Blood-red war flag laughed bitterly. This way, our team will have the money to recruit a few more experts. My condolences. Wuji patted Blood-red war flag's shoulder and comforted them. This was the reason why Chuanjin did not play with the big guilds. The big guilds might seem like they had the advantage in numbers, but only they themselves knew how difficult it was to accomplish such a feat. Chuanjin had more than 10 people. If they earned some money, they could just casually distribute it. Everyone would gain something. With so many people in the big guilds, no matter how much money they had, they would not be able to split it evenly. In the end, the money they earned would be invested into the guild's development. So much effort and no profits. The guys in Chuanjin would not do such a thing. The competition on the field was still ongoing. The battle between professional experts had always been simple and direct. In most cases, a single mistake could determine the winner. Only the team competition would take up some time. But overall, the competition was still progressing smoothly. The competition lasted from morning until 10 at night. The professional competition was finally over, and 15 teams advanced to the next day's competition. Among them, Sword Against the Heavens team was still defeated by Dark Moon team in the third round due to their lack of foundation and lack of coordination with the experts. At this point, only a motley crew was left of Yu Hui's 3 teams. They were almost completely annihilated. Yu Huicheng, who had been buzzing on the forum, also fell from his pedestal, and his reputation declined day by day. Originally, it was a great honor for a main city to have 3 teams in the professional league. In the end, 2 professional teams were defeated in the first round, and the remaining team was notorious. Such a main city naturally did not have a high evaluation in the hearts of the players. On the way back to the hotel after the competition, Wang Yu and the others met the Dark Moon team again. Eliminating Yu Huicheng's team in the first round made this group of guys very confident, especially Death Dark Moon, who took the initiative to provoke. Did you see that? Yu Huicheng's professional team is not our opponent. You motley crew better pack up and get lost. Don't let us meet you on the field. Of course, this level of provocation was nothing to the guys in Chuanjin. In the face of Death Dark Moon's provocation, not only was everyone not angry, but Wuji laughed and mocked. If you are afraid, just say it. Why are you yelling below the stage? We are not your girlfriend. We will stand there and let you hit us without fighting back. You. Death Dark Moon's face turned black after being exposed by Wuji once again. He said fiercely, "You guys are just stubborn." Wuji smiled and said, Some places are harder. Unlike you, you hit your girlfriend when you can't get hard." The word hit was emphasized. Death Dark Moon said with red eyes, "Do you want to die? Come, I'll say the same thing again. Try and punch me." Wuji once again stretched his face forward. "Me." Death Dark Moon raised his hand and was about to hit. At this time, the Dark Moon team members hurriedly rushed up and dragged Death Dark Moon away. "Let me go, I want to kill him," Death Dark Moon shouted while struggling. Chapter 1228. A Thought for Eternity. Chapter 1229. Team Dark Moon was just a small interlude. Other than Death Dark Moon jumping up and down, it didn't affect anyone else's mood. At the end of the day, all 30 professional teams took to the field. After witnessing the new mental outlook and brand new condition of their old rivals, the players of the various teams who returned to the hotel were all on high alert as they researched strategies to deal with them. After all, it was a brand new mode. The change in operating mode had a huge impact on a person's strength. Everyone was a professional player, and they couldn't afford to fight unprepared in this kind of situation. On the way back, seeing that all the teams had a positive attitude, the Chuanjin team also became nervous. This was especially so for Ming Jiandaoxue. After sneaking around for a while, he came back and asked, "Wuji, look at the pro players. Are we still going out to play tonight? What else can I do if I don't play?" Wuji asked. "Researching tactics." Daoxue said, "Bullsh *T. Wuji said with disdain. The highest level of tactics is to adapt to the situation. Once the routine is fixed, the tactics will become a dead technique. Then what do you mean? Dao Xue said with a face full of black lines. There's a bar not far from here. I heard there are a lot of pretty girls there. Who wants to go? Take me. Take me. Very quickly, the group of people came up with a strategy to pick up girls. This bunch of trash. Looking at the group of troublemakers, Wang Yu shook his head. At the same time, in the Hall of Nine States, the captain, 5 Lakes 4 Seas, held a small stick in his hand. He was pointing at the names of the various teams and analyzing tactics with his subordinates. Team Skyfire didn't have any outstanding points this time, but their top player Samadhi True Fire's fire magic is superb. We still have to be careful. More than half of Team Red Dream are girls. Don't be too ruthless when fighting. If you meet that Yi Hong or Green, then go for it. Why? The team members asked in confusion. 5 Lakes 4 Seas said with disdain, a man mingling with a group of girls, and you're asking why. Makes sense. Everyone nodded. If there was a chance, then go for it. If there wasn't a chance, then create one. As for the Sky Dragon Squad, 5 Lakes 4 Seas said, I didn't expect experts like Ning Jing Jiyuan and Lei Gongfang to be poached away by them. We have to deal with them, especially War God. We have to be on our guard. But if he's alone, we don't have to worry too much. In the end, they were still the #1 guild in the national server. Their words were filled with confidence. They even dared to look down on an existence like War God. At this moment, 3 Mountains, 5 Peaks, who had been silent all this while, asked, Boss, according to what you said, there's no need to worry about this or that. Doesn't that mean that we're going to win the championship again? Then why did you call us here? Become a champion? Hee hee. 5 Lakes 4 Seas smiled faintly and said, these old opponents were beaten by us all the way here. Of course, we don't have to worry. The one we need to be the most cautious about is this team. As he spoke, the stick in 5 Lakes 4 Seas hand went straight to the corner of the wall. Everyone followed the stick of the 5 Lakes and 4 Seas and saw a bunch of messy photos pasted in the corner. The photos showed a bunch of wretched-looking guys, and at the bottom was the introduction of the team, Motley Bunch. Seeing this group of guys, everyone could not help but laugh. Boss, are you crazy? What's there to be afraid of with this group of guys? They're just a bunch of amateurs. That's right. 3 Mountains, 5 Peaks also agreed. A bunch of guys who play dirty. You can't be thinking that we'll fall for their tricks, right? That's right. 5 Lakes 4 Seas pointed at the photo of Wuji on the wall and said, this guy is called Wuji. Everyone must have heard of him. I know. He's the current leader of Qianjin. Wasn't the previous leader, Dugu Shaoling, still? As they spoke, 3 Mountains, 5 Peaks thought of their days at 3 Fiends Manor again. That's right. 5 Lakes 4 Seas said, this Wuji is known as endless poison in the pugilistic world. Although his reputation is terrible, he's a true master of tactics. Whether it's small-scale guerrilla warfare or large-scale battles, he hasn't lost a single battle. It's said that Yu Huicheng resisted the attacks of the other major cities under his command. It can't be that exaggerated. When the team members heard that, their faces were filled with disbelief. How could such an amazing person be an amateur? 5 Lakes 4 Seas said calmly, those who don't believe me can go and watch their previous match. See how they defeated a strong opponent despite being weak. If you can't see it, you can go to 3 Mountains, 5 Peaks later to find out how 3 Fiends Mana disappeared. 3 Mountains, 5 Peaks revealed a strange expression when they heard that. There's also this person. As 5 Lakes 4 Seas said that, he pointed at Mingdu's photo with his small stick. Qianjin's #1 wizard, Mingdu. His nickname is Li Jichang. He's arrogant and violent. Most of Qianjin's notoriety comes from this guy. He's that Dragon Knight, Li Jichang. Cut the crap. Dragon Knight is Zhen Jibing. His name is by Di Changjian. He's a sworn enemy of Mingdu. I see. 5 Lakes 4 Seas then pointed at Chun Xiang's wretched photo and said, this is Ji Chunxiang. His nickname is Meticulous Strategist. Everyone should have seen how good this guy is. Yes. Isn't this the scariest pro in Qianjin? Everyone nodded when they saw Chun Xiang's photo. Although Chun Xiang was the most wretched, this guy not only had the most OP skills in the game, but he was also able to toy with an expert like Pure Ice and Jade Hero in the palm of his hand. He had left a deep impression on all the professional players, and they unanimously regarded him as the most fearsome expert of the Quanjin sect. The scariest? He. Five Lakes Four Seas laughed coldly. He took down Wang Yu's photo from the wall and spun it in front of everyone. Then, he said solemnly, "Everyone, remember this. This person is the scariest in Qiuanjin." Haha, isn't this the acrobatic grandmaster of combat? Can he be better than Chun Xiang? Everyone laughed when they saw Wang Yu's photo. In the eyes of this group of gaming geeks, no matter how good a martial art was, it was not as good as the best skills in the game. You'll know when you fight them. Five Lakes Four Seas hung Wang Yu's photo on the wall again and said, "In short, these four are the top 4 troublemakers in Qiuanjin. If you meet them, you must be careful. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you when you die. As a pro player and the strongest champion team, if you lose to these amateurs, your reputation will be tarnished by your fans. Do you still need me to remind you?" Hearing this, everyone sat up straight and nodded. Chapter 1230. As a public figure, fans were his livelihood. If they scolded him, he had to endure it no matter how unhappy he was. He couldn't just send an apology video and say, "If I let my fans down, my whole family will die. My millions of fans are my family." Even someone as shameless as Neo would at most rob the sofa a few times to take revenge on society. The above is the author's standpoint. If it involves someone, I'm sorry for speaking so frankly. If you don't like it, you can come and hit me. My fists are more straightforward. Compared to writing books, my fists and feet are more professional. Then, let's get back to business. The next day was the second round of the professional competition. Excluding the 15 teams that were eliminated yesterday, plus the motley team that had a bye in the first round, there were 16 teams left at this time. In the cheers and curses of the audience, as for who they were cursing, everyone knew. All the teams entered the arena again. It was also the first time for Qiuanjin's group to sit together with professional masters. After a round of selection, those left on the stage were the best of the best. At this time, everyone was full of momentum and ready to go. In contrast, Qiuanjin's group was more and more sloppy. As usual, it was still the random selection mode. Just as the host announced that they were ready to start selecting the preliminary team, a voice suddenly came up from the players' seats. "I want a challenge." Challenge? Hearing this voice, everyone was slightly taken aback. In addition to the random selection mode in the professional league, team players also had the right to challenge. Everyone could choose a team that they wanted to challenge from the participating teams and then send a challenge request. Of course, the challenge was targeted. It was a bit like revenge. Under normal circumstances, everyone was in the circle. Everyone would see each other all the time. Even if they were enemies on the field, the relationship between them was also good. No one wanted to easily offend others. Moreover, the word challenge had always been initiated by the weak against the strong. Anyone who cared about face would not take the initiative to challenge the weak team. The winning rate would not be too high, so there was not much conflict. Few people would bring their emotions into the game. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Death Dark Moon pointing at Wuji's nose and shouting, "Dark Moon team wants to challenge Qiuanjin." Damn! Hearing Death Dark Moon's words, everyone was dumbfounded. You're a professional team challenging an amateur team. Don't you have any shame? Oh, could it be that he wanted to turn the tables on who's more shameless? Yes, the Dark Moon battle team's move is obviously half the battle. The host was stunned for a moment, then cut the camera to Wang Yu and asked, "Captain Tai, do you dare to fight?" This host is also sinister enough. He asked, "Do you dare to accept the challenge? Is there anything in this world that Qiuanjin doesn't dare to do?" Moreover, the challengers now are the scumbags of the Dark Moon battle team. Wang Yu replied without thinking, "Why wouldn't I dare?" At the same time, the host announced, "The motley crowd battle team accepts the challenge." The first match, the Dark Moon battle team versus the motley crowd battle team. The match begins now. Crash! In the auditorium, The audience was boiling with excitement. Damn it, this motley crew was shameless, wretched, and lowly. In this kind of situation, facing a pro-level expert challenge, they actually dared to accept the challenge. Such manly behavior really made everyone's jaws drop. Damn it, this Dark Moon battle team is worse than a mob. That's right. In the game, the entire arena was soundtracked. Everyone in Chuanjin could hear the audience's discussions and cheers clearly. Everyone in Chuanjin was speechless. Is this a compliment or a scolding? Wuji sneered. Whether it's a compliment or not, it's time for us to show some real skills in this game. Be more spirited later and fight to the death. Got it, got it. Everyone began to rub their palms. Since the Dark Moon battle team was the challenger, the Dark Moon battle team chose the map first in the first one-on-one match. In the first one-on-one match, in order to speed things up, it had always been an arena setting. The Dark Moon battle team was no exception. The first match was also this setting. In this game, Chuanjin vowed to destroy the Dark Moon battle team, so they used nuclear weapons in the first game. As the scene on the arena switched, Death Dark Moon and Wang Yu were teleported to the arena at the same time. Death Dark Moon's profession was a warrior. On a small map like the arena, the warrior had an absolute advantage. After all, the long-range professions couldn't kite. The melee professions were no match for the warrior. Agility professions like the Grandmaster of Combat and the Assassin were also very limited in their positioning. Seeing that the first player on Chuanjin's side was the Grandmaster of Combat, Death Dark Moon couldn't help but sneer a few times. As soon as the game started, Death Dark Moon withdrew his sword, leaned over, lowered his head, and charged directly at Wang Yu. According to this routine, the Grandmaster of Combat would inevitably retreat or move to the sides to avoid the collision. At this time, Death Dark Moon only needed to receive a whirlwind indiscriminately to kill the opponent. However, seeing Death Dark Moon charging over, Wang Yu snorted coldly. Instead of retreating, he charged toward Death Dark Moon. Death Dark Moon was shocked. He quickly canceled the collision and wanted to activate the whirlwind in advance. Canceling the collision skill would reveal a flaw, so he couldn't receive the whirlwind indiscriminately. Showing a flaw in front of Wang Yu was no different from courting death. The moment Death Dark Moon canceled the collision, Wang Yu activated his internal energy. He moved sideways and flashed to the left side of Death Dark Moon. He used his feet to trip him. At the same time, a pair of big hands with the light of Tiger Strike pressed on the back of Death Dark Moon's head, forcefully pushing back Death Dark Moon's whirlwind. The priority of the grab skill was originally higher than other skills. Wang Yu also activated his internal energy to strengthen Tiger Strike in a tiger descends the mountain. The priority was even more amazing. Bang! Death Dark Moon, whose body was unstable, was pressed to the ground by Wang Yu's claw. Wang Yu was a man who loved his wife. He didn't have a good impression of a scumbag like Death Dark Moon. Naturally, he wouldn't show any mercy. After Death Dark Moon fell to the ground, Wang Yu lifted his foot and stepped on the back of Death Dark Moon's head. Bang! Before Death Dark Moon realized what was going on, his head was crushed by Wang Yu. He turned into a white light and returned to the team. From the time the two started to the end of the match, it was less than 3 seconds. Death Dark Moon responded to his name and entered the arena. Judge's notification. First round, motley crowd, Iron Bull wins. Hearing the prompt, the audience was dumbfounded. Damn, what happened just now? I don't know. How did Death Dark Moon die? It was too fast. I didn't see it clearly. What happened? Chapter 12:31. Putting aside his character as a professional player and the captain of the Dark Moon team, Death Dark Moon was still quite strong. Even if he wasn't a first-rate master, he was still hovering around the quasi-first-rate. Even the professional masters present couldn't be 100% sure that they could defeat Death Dark Moon on such an occasion. However, such a professional player was instantly killed by an amateur player. Everyone present didn't even understand how Death Dark Moon died. It was really unbelievable. Just as everyone was discussing the cause of Death Dark Moon's death, the big screen replayed the process of Wang Yu killing Death Dark Moon in slow motion. In slow motion, Wang Yu's movement was already so fast that it was hard to capture, but everyone could roughly see the process of Death Dark Moon's death. Before they saw it clearly, everyone just felt that it was unbelievable. However, after seeing it clearly, everyone's mood instantly became inconceivable. He dodged the collision sideways, tripped his feet, and used ferocious tiger strike to press the unsteady opponent to the ground. This set of movements didn't sound difficult, but to be able to dodge the opponent's skills in a high-speed collision and perform such movements at the same time, the difficulty factor was no less than pulling the driver out of the window in a moving car. Such quick and accurate movements, as well as godlike reflexes, were simply unheard of by everyone. Especially the last kick that Wang Yu gave to the back of Death Dark Moon's head, it made everyone feel the ruthlessness of Wang Yu's attack. Yo! Ningjing Ziyuan saw the replay on the screen, raised his eyebrows, and asked Dugu Jiuqiang calmly, "Manager Yi, I heard that Xuanjin and you guys used to be enemies in the apocalypse?" "Huh." Dugu Nine Spears laughed and said, "That's right, those bastards have been chased and beaten by us quite a bit." Hee hee. Ningjing Gan smiled faintly and said, "Unless the Grandmaster of Combat wasn't among them at that time, I'm willing to believe that you guys were chased and beaten up." Dugu Jiuqiang's face turned red, and he showed an awkward expression. Otherwise, it could be said that he was an expert among experts. He could even tell from this. Just when everyone was surprised by the battle just now, the players of the second round between the Mob Battle Team and the Dark Moon Battle Team had also been spread to the arena. The player for the second round of the Dark Moon Battle Team was called Drifting Dark Moon. This kid was tall and had red hair, black heavy armor, and he was holding a brown giant shield in his hand with the words Crescent Moon Tensho carved on it. Holy shit, is this kid so flashy? Seeing Drifting Soul Dark Moon's appearance, this image involuntarily popped up in the audience's mind. However, when everyone's eyes fell on Evildoers Run Wild's face, their minds were filled with question marks. F***CK. This doesn't make sense. Didn't this kid go up in the first round? Why did he jump up in the second round? It seemed that in order to wipe out the Dark Moon Battle Team, Xuanjin was also ruthless. They let Wang Yu go up in the first round and Evildoers Run Wild in the second round. Obviously, they didn't want to leave the opponent a way out. Seeing Evildoers Run Wild in the arena, the host also involuntarily rubbed his eyes. After looking at the list of players, he recovered and quickly said the second round, Dark Moon Battle Team Drifting Dark Moon versus Mob Battle Team Evildoers Run Wild. Evildoers Run Wild? As soon as the host said this, the audience's jaws dropped. This is the legendary Evildoers Run Wild. F***CK. What's the relationship between this kid and that guy just now? Evildoers Run Wild was the biggest boss in Rebirth. He alone fought against the existence of the whole world's guilds. Anyone who played the game had heard of the name Evildoers Run Wild. Even the professional players couldn't help but be amazed when they heard the name Evildoers Run Wild. They didn't expect the legendary #1 businessman to look like this. Drifting Dark Moon was a little afraid when he saw Evildoers Run Wild's appearance. However, after knowing that his opponent was a businessman, he couldn't help but return to his showy self. The match began. Drifting Dark Moon couldn't help but mock. "You are a businessman. What are you doing here instead of doing business?" In the eyes of normal people, players who didn't level up in the game but focused on doing business were not doing proper work. The strength of such players generally came from a set of good equipment. However, this was a professional arena. The gap between professional masters and ordinary players couldn't be made up by equipment. Hee hee. Evildoers Run Wild pointed his finger at Drifting Dark Moon and said with a smile, "Looks like you are very confident. Come, Daddy will let you make one move first." "What a joke," Drifting Dark Moon retorted. "I'll let you make 3 moves first." Hee hee, then I won't be polite. The evil Hung Xing grinned, then leaped towards the Drifting Soul Dark Moon. Drifting Dark Moon was a professional master. Seeing Evildoers Run Wild rushing over, he calmly raised the giant shield in his hand to protect himself. At the same time, his other hand hid the sword behind the shield. However, at this moment, a large hand flashed from the side at an unbelievable angle. The shield was buckled on Drifting Dark Moon's face. Aya. At the same time, evildoers run wild screamed. Didn't you say you would let Daddy make 3 moves first? Hiding a sword behind the shield, you're not being kind. As he said that, evildoers run wild stepped on the back of Drifting Dark Moon's knee. Drifting Dark Moon involuntarily knelt forward. Immediately after, evildoers run wild's hand forcefully pulled back. Plop. Drifting Dark Moon felt the world spin around him and fell to the ground. After falling to the ground, Drifting Dark Moon was shocked. He hurriedly raised his shield to protect himself. Who knew that evildoers run wild would turn around and crouch behind Drifting Dark Moon's head? His right hand reached out and grabbed Drifting Dark Moon's distinctive red hair. He lifted it up and slammed it into the ground. Dong. 1 move. Dong. 2 moves. Dong. 3 moves. Evildoers run wild counted as he slammed. After 3 moves, although Drifting Dark Moon's health did not drop much, he was shaken to the point of seeing stars. Although the evildoer Hung Xing and Wang Yu were blood-related brothers, their personalities were completely different. If it was Wang Yu who was provoked, he would at most kill the other party with a single punch, giving the other party a quick death. However, the evildoer Hung Xing's way of doing things was a bit like torturing his opponent. Dong dong dong. With a muffled sound, Drifting Dark Moon's head was smashed into the ground by evildoers run wild time and time again. As the #1 merchant in the game, evildoers run wild's equipment naturally went without saying. In particular, evildoers run wild's most prominent grab skill was maxed out. Moreover, the opponent was in a collapsed state. If he could not quick recover, he would not be able to use even half a skill. Poor Drifting Dark Moon was like a ball in evildoers run wild's hand. No matter how he struggled, he could not escape from evildoers run wild's clutches. Looking at the health bar on his head dropping bit by bit, Drifting Dark Moon regretted for the first time that he was a tank. Chapter 1232. Bang, bang, bang. Evildoers run wild meticulously smashed Drifting Dark Moon's head on the floor. This extremely rhythmic sound was like a drum. Every time it sounded, it was shocking. Looking at the lifeless Drifting Dark Moon and the expressionless evildoers run wild, the audience felt chills down their spines. Finally, under the abuse of evildoers run wild, not only was Drifting Dark Moon physically tortured by evildoers run wild, but his spirit was also greatly traumatized. At this time, Drifting Dark Moon also knew that he had no chance, so he involuntarily chose to surrender. System notification. Motley Crowd Battle Team, Evildoers Run Wild 1. Evildoers Run Wild stood up with an innocent smile on his face. Looking at the innocent face of Evildoers Run Wild, the audience felt a chill in their hearts again. This bastard is definitely a devil. At the same time, their impression of Chuanjin's group changed again. Meow. This is the arena of professional masters. Winning 2 consecutive rounds with an overwhelming advantage, this group of guys seems to be not as simple as being shameless and nasty. After losing 2 consecutive rounds, the members of the Dark Moon Battle Team were already panicking. Originally, this group of guys thought that the Motley Crowd Battle Team was just a group of pushovers. Therefore, in order to teach this group of arrogant guys a lesson, they challenged the Motley Crowd Battle Team, who knew that when they fought, it was not the case at all. This group of guys was actually more brutal than the other. In the first round, Death Dark Moon lost inexplicably. In the second round, Drifting Dark Moon lost extremely miserably. It was unknown what would happen next. Who's going for the next round? At this time, the members of the Dark Moon Battle Team had lost their previous arrogance and began to push each other. After all, these guys were professional masters, and they were still very clear about their identity. The opponent was just a group of amateur players. It was not glorious to win, and it was even more shameful to lose. If they were killed like Drifting Dark Moon, how could they survive in the gaming circle in the future? How about, see how you go? Everyone looked at each other, and their eyes finally fell on the only girl in the team, Zhuge Xiaoyu. Me? Zhuge Xiaoyu was shocked. Why me? Everyone said, that's because you're a girl. They probably won't be that ruthless, right? Zhuge Xiaoyu was speechless. Indeed, there weren't many female players in the game. No matter how rude a person was, he would still be a gentleman in front of a female player. No matter how cruel his opponent was, he couldn't possibly kill a girl. So, all right. Looking at her companion's pleading eyes, Zhuge Xiaoyu had no choice but to nod in agreement. A beam of light flashed, and Zhuge Xiaoyu was teleported to the arena. At the same time, Mingdu also went up. When Mingdu saw that his opponent was a lady, he could not help but reveal a perverted smile as he stared at Zhuge Xiaoyu. F***CK. Upon seeing Mingdu's appearance, everyone from Quanzhen was shocked. Everyone knew about Mingdu's personality. His threat was directly related to his opponent's appearance and gender. If his opponent was a man, the more attractive he was, the worse he would die. If his opponent was a woman, the more attractive she was, the less threatening she was. Although Zhuge Xiaoyu's appearance was average in real life, her character in the game was alluring. Was Mingdu going to be defeated in the third round? F***CK. Just then, Bao San said agitatedly, "I told you, why don't you let me go?" Wu Ji pursed his lips and said, "If you go, I'm afraid we won't have any luck with women. Trust old Li. He should know his limits." At this moment, Zhuge Xiaoyu also felt Mingdu's passionate gaze. Being stared at by such a guy made Zhuge Xiaoyu's hair stand on end. However, considering that it was a competition, Zhuge Xiaoyu held back her disgust and winked at Mingdu. Zhuge Xiaoyu's winking didn't matter, but Mingdu got excited. His eyes wandered around Zhuge Xiaoyu's body even more intensely. Not to be outdone, Zhuge Xiaoyu also sent a signal to Mingdu. The competition had not started yet, but everyone could smell the strange smell in the arena. If they were not in the competition, the two of them would probably go and get a hotel room right away. Finally, the competition started under the impatient gaze of the audience. Zhuge Xiaoyu smiled and stopped making eye contact with Mingdu. Instead, she hooked her finger. And Mingdu went up to her with a dazed expression. "I can't watch anymore." Wang Yu and the rest of Quanzhen covered their faces and broke down. What the hell is this? It's so embarrassing. The Dark Moon players were dumbfounded. Drifting Soul Dark Moon exclaimed, F***CK, that works too? If I knew, I would have done the same. The others looked at Drifting Soul Dark Moon and said with certainty, "If you had done that just now, I'm afraid you would have died a worse death." Drifting Soul Dark Moon was speechless. On the other hand, the members of the Nine States team looked at Five Lakes and Four Seas speechlessly. "Boss, is this the terrifying master of Chuanjin that you were talking about?" Five Lakes and Four Seas said awkwardly, Misjudgment, it's purely an accident." Zhuge Xiaoyu was also a mage. Just when everyone was dumbfounded, Mingdu had already stepped into Zhuge Xiaoyu's attack range. Seeing that Mingdu had stepped into her attack range, Zhuge Xiaoyu's eyes suddenly tensed, and her expression became serious. Then, she raised her staff casually, and a green light hit Mingdu's body. At the same time, a line of ellipsis appeared above Mingdu's head. Silent Spell, a rare skill that could make the target lose the ability to chant for a certain period of time. Its specific attributes were similar to the priest's sacred fire. Everyone knew that the mage profession relied on skills. Without the ability to chant, one was basically a useless person. Even a top-notch mage master would be a target that could not fight back without the ability to cast spells. Is this kid that useless? Seeing that Mingdu was so easily silenced, Zhuge Xiaoyu was a little surprised. Then, she was overjoyed. She raised her staff to condense an ice spear and threw it at Mingdu. However, at this moment, a strange smile appeared on Mingdu's face. At the same time, he made a strange hand gesture at Zhuge Xiaoyu with both hands. Zhuge Xiaoyu was slightly stunned. Suddenly, the scene before her changed. When she reacted, she was already at the place where Mingdu was just now. Bam! Immediately after, Zhuge Xiaoyu's waist seemed to be hit by something, and she could not help but take a step back. The health bar on her head dropped by 1/3, and she was also slowed down at the same time. Zhuge Xiaoyu quickly looked down and saw that there was an ice spear stuck in her waist. It was the one that she had thrown just now. Before Zhuge Xiaoyu could figure out what had happened, Mingdu, who was not far away, smiled wretchedly and made a strange hand gesture with both hands. Boom! Chapter 1233. System Notification. Motley Team Mingdu won. Ha ha! At the end of the game, Mingdu's mute state was refreshed and lifted. Mingdu proudly waved to everyone under the ring. Then he laughed and left the ring. Returning to the team, Mingdu shouted with a smug face. See that? This is called beating her own game. That silly girl really thinks she is very charming. Ha ha! Hearing Mingdu's words, the others finally understood Mingdu's purpose. Logically speaking, Zhuge Xiaoyu was also a professional level master no matter what. Although Mingdu was strong, there was still a gap between him and a real professional master in terms of skills. Facing Zhuge Xiaoyu, there was naturally no guarantee that he could win. Therefore, after Mingdu came on stage, he first revealed a flaw to let Zhuge Xiaoyu think that his honey trap was successful. Then, when Zhuge Xiaoyu let down her guard, he attacked her unprepared and won in one fell swoop. Zhuge Xiaoyu was also sullen. In a real fight, she might not lose to Mingdu, but she was outsmarted by her own cleverness. It was really tragic. Amazing, amazing. This group of guys from Qiuanjin always liked to use conspiracy as wisdom. After knowing Mingdu's true intentions, they all gave a thumbs up. At the same time, Five Lakes 4Cs also explained to his teammates like a wise man in hindsight, trying to justify his inference. However, Five Lakes 4C's teammates didn't buy it. Instead, they curled their lips and said, "We all understand the reason, but isn't that kid muted? How can he still cast spells?" Well, Five Lakes 4Cs said awkwardly, "I don't know. It may be related to his strange gesture. In short, we can't underestimate this guy." Morale was a very wonderful thing. Even in the online game, which was supported by attributes, morale directly affected the performance of combat power. In fact, no matter what, the Dark Moon team was also a professional level master. Not to mention anything else, their mentality had been professionally trained. Compared with amateurs, it was less likely that their morale would be affected by failure. However, the 3 games they lost were really too strange. In the first game, the captain was killed in seconds. In the second game, his teammates were killed. In the third game, his teammates dug a pit for themselves. Losing so inexplicably, even the professionals couldn't sit still at this moment. The mentality of everyone in the Dark Moon battle team had completely collapsed. At this time, the players of the Dark Moon team were like frightened rabbits. They were afraid that the opponent would come up with more excessive means. In the next 2 games, the players of the Dark Moon team could only hide in the corner, shivering, and did not dare to fight back when they were attacked by the players of Qiuanjin. In the end, they ended the first battle with a tragic score of 0-5. As the saying goes, good news doesn't leave the house, but bad news travels 1,000 miles. This was the first time in history that a professional team had challenged an amateur team and ended up losing. Such a glorious feat was naturally sung by the players. A few days ago, the slogan of the players was still, "Don't be too serious." At this time, it had become, "Don't be like the Dark Moon team." In the lounge, everyone in the Dark Moon battle team looked gloomy. They didn't expect to be beaten up like this by Qiuanjin's group. It should be known that for a team like theirs that had the support of an owner, everything they did had to be done in accordance with the contract. Taking the initiative to challenge Qiuanjin's group was purely the personal behavior of this group of guys. It was not written in the contract. If they won, it would be fine. The owner would gain both fame and fortune. Maybe they would even be given a bonus for this matter. However, if they lost, they would have to be responsible for it themselves. It was a taboo in the industry to cause the team's performance to decline because of personal behavior. It was likely that even their wages would be deducted. "Boss, what should we do now?" Everyone in the Dark Moon battle team gathered together and set their eyes on Death Dark Moon. After all, this idea was proposed by the captain of Death Dark Moon. They couldn't let everyone suffer with him. Although Death Dark Moon was a bit impulsive, he was not brainless when he calmed down. Touching his chin and thinking for a moment, Death Dark Moon muttered, "Has everyone noticed that the strength gap between the players of this motley team is a bit obvious?" If you put it this way, it seems to be true. Listening to Death Dark Moon's words, everyone seemed to think of something, and their eyes suddenly lit up. Isn't that right? Judging from the previous game, the two guys in the first and second games were abnormally strong. They gave their opponents no room to fight back at all. The strength of the few people in the later games was obviously a bit weak. Not to mention the mage who won by deceiving people. Just looking at the opponents in the last two games, if their team did not blindly defend, they might not necessarily lose. There was also a strength gap between normal professional team members. However, since everyone could be in the same team, their strength was basically similar. Even if there was a gap, it would not be too big. However, it was very rare to see such a big gap between the people of Chuanjin. Seeing that everyone realized this, Death Dark Moon said firmly, "So, I think their team should only have those two relatively powerful masters. The others are very ordinary. The head-on attacks in the previous two games really stunned us, but it was just two moves." The captain is right. Hearing this, everyone thought about it carefully, and they all felt that Death Dark Moon's words were somewhat reasonable. Death Dark Moon struck while the iron was hot. Then, in the next two games, we should be able to pull back the score. Is everyone confident? Yes. Everyone's fighting spirit was high. It had to be said that Death Dark Moon was quite eloquent. With a few casual words, he reignited everyone's fighting spirit. In Chuanjin's lounge, Wang Yu's team had just won the first game. They were in a good mood. It felt good to step on their opponents fair and square. Wang Yu smiled and poked Wuji, who was resting with his eyes closed. "Wuji, how are we going to play the next game? Is it the same as the first game?" "Bullsh asterisk T." Wuji said listlessly. "The second game is the same as before. Leave it to fate." "Leave it to fate again?" Hearing Wuji's words, everyone couldn't help but twitch their lips. Ever since they entered the Pro League, Wuji would say this every second game. Wuji said gloomily, "What can I do? I'm also helpless. Do you guys think that we are playing against the kind of people we used to play against?" Indeed, Chuanjin's previous opponents were all normal players. Now, their opponents were pro players. Wang Yu often said that hard work was useful, but what was the point of having a genius that was based on the same amount of hard work? No matter how talented Chuanjin's players were, there was still a gap in strength between them and the pro players who used the game as their job. The second game was randomized. If Wang Yu or Evildoers Run Wild were randomly chosen in the first game, needless to say, they would definitely win this game. If these two were not randomly chosen in 5 consecutive games, the result was self-evident. Chapter 12:34. The break time was over, and both players entered the game again. The second match began, and the motley team chose the map. Wang Yu didn't hesitate and chose random. Since it was up to fate, he would listen to the end. Under the system's random selection, the second match's map appeared on the big screen. City Streets. This was a medium-sized map. It wasn't too big or too small. There were 5 straight streets on each side, and the field of vision was quite wide. However, there were tall buildings on both sides of the street, which could also provide cover for the players. It was a standard sniping map, and archers could exert their greatest advantage in this map. However, Chuanjin only had 2 archers. One had relatively average skills, while the other had good skills, but he wasn't good at long-range sniping. Needless to say, Wang Yu used all his luck on reincarnation. Soon, the players for the first match were selected and sent to the arena by the system. The Dark Moon team's player was called Nimble Hands, and his profession was a relatively non-mainstream lurker. Lurker was the advanced profession of godly thief. Not only was he unparalleled in sneaking and picking locks, but he also had the talent of being sensitive and could see through traps and other mechanisms. On the other hand, the Chuanjin team's player was Famous Sword Dao Xue. Famous Sword Dao Xue was a tragedy. His skills weren't great, but his appearance rate was very high. In such a match, he was usually a free point. Of course, Famous Sword Dao Xue had self-awareness. As soon as he entered the arena, famous sword Daoshua made up his mind to be a coward to the end. So at the start of the match, famous sword Daoshua directly activated stealth, intending to switch with nimble hands one by one. However, when famous sword Daoshua moved forward, he found that nimble hands didn't turn invisible. Instead, he stood in place arrogantly, luring the snake out of its hole. Famous sword Daoshua had used this move a few days ago. Seeing nimble hands doing this, famous sword Daoshua couldn't help but curse. Damn, are you trying to lure me to stab you? I've used this move before. Do you think I'll fall for it? Following that, famous sword Daoshua found a corner and squatted down. He began to compete with his opponent in patience. Obviously, as a professional, Nimble Hands was much more patient than famous sword Daoshua. 10 minutes had passed, and not only had this kid not moved, he was even squatting on the ground with a dagger in his hand. What a versatile master. Another 10 minutes passed, and Daoshua looked at the nimble hands that were not far away from him, who had finished drawing the first chapter of Dragon Ball. Suddenly, he was unable to restrain himself. Everyone had the mentality of opportunism, especially this group of fellows from Chuanjin. Even if there was a 10% chance of winning, they would still dare to risk their lives. At this moment, seeing that their opponents were focused on something else, how could Ming Jian Daoshua hold back? This brat is definitely luring the snake out of its hole. If I go over and stab him, he will definitely take the opportunity to stab me to death. Mother of asterisk her, I will disappear. What was there to be afraid of? Cheers! After weighing the pros and cons again and again, famous sword Dao Shui finally decided to fight to the death. Hence, he quietly circled around the building and moved behind Nimble Hands. However, when Namakin Daoshua's nimble hand was less than 3 meters away from him, his nimble hand suddenly shone with a faint blue radiance. At the same time, Namakin Daoshua's stealth was mysteriously removed. The power of sensitivity. Seeing this scene, Namakin Daoshua was shocked. It was said that lurkers had the talent of sensitivity and could see through traps and mechanisms. Unexpectedly, it could even see through the stealth of assassins. In a panic, Namakin Daoshua couldn't care less about stabbing Nimble Hands behind his back. While retreating, he hurriedly activated Vanish. Blinded by a leaf. At this moment, Nimble Hands had already turned around. With a wave of his hand, a leaf flew over and stuck to Namakin Daoshua. As Namakin Daoshua disappeared, the leaf leisurely floated in the air, looking very comical. A few seconds later, Vanish's invincibility period ended. Without saying anything, Nimble Hands activated Quick Movement, rushed to the side of the leaf, and fiercely stabbed the air a few times. Namakin Daoshua didn't even have time to appear before he was stabbed into a white light by Nimble Hands. Assassins, after all, were so simple and crude when fighting. The Dark Moon battle team finally recovered a point in the second round. Everyone from Chuanjin pointed at Namakin Daoshua, who was knocked off the stage, and said angrily, "Just be a coward. Why did you have to provoke him?" Sigh. Namakin Daoshua sighed. It's not like you didn't see him like that just now. If I didn't stab him, I would feel sorry for his posture. After Namakin Daoshua died, to place one's pride entered the second round. Nimble Hands was worthy of being a professional level master. He had a way to deal with any profession. Seeing that his opponent was a grandmaster of combat who didn't know stealth, Nimble Hands immediately activated stealth. To place one's pride was also alert. He quickly ran to the bottom of the wall and leaned his back against the wall to prevent his opponent from attacking from behind. However, as a professional master, Nimble Hands had absolute confidence. He didn't intend to attack from behind at all. Instead, he suddenly appeared in front of to place one's pride and directly stabbed his dagger from the front. Fortunately, to place one's pride was young and had strong reflexes. He dodged Nimble Hands' attack sideways. Then he raised his hand and used Tiger Strike to grab Nimble Hands' dagger. Nimble Hands was calm and composed. He turned the dagger unhurriedly, bypassing to place one's pride's hand and slashing toward to place one's pride's wrist. To place one's pride hurriedly withdrew his hand, turned around, and kicked sideways. Nimble Hands grabbed the dagger in front of his chest. Bang! To place one's pride kicked Nimble Hands' dagger. Since it didn't directly hit Nimble Hands, it didn't cause Nimble Hands to be knocked into the air. However, Nimble Hands was kicked back a few steps. After one round of fighting, both of them had a general understanding of their opponent. Their eyes were more serious. What a strong guy! Seeing Nimble Hands not far away, To Place One's Pride couldn't help but frown. If he hadn't dodged in time, his arm might have been sliced off by this guy. Moreover, it seemed like this guy hadn't used his full strength. Nimble Hands looked at To Place One's Pride in front of him, and his heart became a bit more vigilant. Damn, he's clearly just an amateur, but his reaction speed and skills have already reached the professional level. If this guy trained like me every day, then I'm afraid I would have died just now. After exclaiming in surprise, To Place One's Pride stomped the ground and rushed toward Nimble Hands. To Place One's Pride stealth skill didn't have a long cooldown. If Nimble Hands didn't take the initiative to attack, then Nimble Hands' stealth skill would come off cooldown, and he would be in an even more passive position. Seeing To Place One's Pride rush over, Nimble Hands remained calm. He lightly jumped back, opening up some distance. At this moment, To Place One's Pride activated Collapsing Fist, and his body suddenly sprinted forward. Nimble Hands faintly smiled and used swift steps. Instead of retreating, he advanced, circling from To Place One's Pride's side to Place One's Pride's back. To Place One's Pride landed on the ground. Nimble Hands raised his dagger and stabbed it towards To Place One's Pride's back with a backstab. Chapter 1235. Absolute Void Kill. Seeing Nimble Hands' playstyle, all the pro players revealed a knowing smile. Ever since Rebirth started, the Thief class had always been very strong in the PK field. Regardless of whether it was the Assassin or the Lurker, they were always in the top 3 of the PK leaderboards. Although the Lurker was a petty thief and wasn't as destructive as the Assassin, the Lurker's senses were sharp, their agility was high, and their technique far surpassed the other classes. If one could play the Lurker to the extreme, their PK wouldn't be any weaker than the Assassin. For example, Nimble Hands' Absolute Void Kill with a unique move for the Lurker against the Grandmaster of Combat. Everyone knew that the Grandmaster of Combat was also an agile class. Due to the fact that the Grandmaster of Combat dealt more damage by jumping up and down than standing on the ground, the Grandmaster of Combat liked to jump up and down when fighting. However, when a player jumped up, they couldn't move as freely as they did on the ground, especially To Place One's Pride. The moment he jumped up and landed on the ground, he was left wide open. The other melee classes didn't have enough instantaneous speed, so they were helpless against the Grandmaster of Combat's weakness. The Lurker's swift movement had a speed bonus, and its instantaneous speed was extremely fast, which was the perfect counter to the Grandmaster of Combat. The so-called Absolute Emptiness Kill was a technique created by using this attribute that countered each other. For a Grandmaster of Combat to jump in front of a Lurker, it took a lot of courage. To Place One's Pride, no matter how good his skills were, was still a normal player. He was relatively unfamiliar with the moves of a pro player. To Place One's Pride reacted and saw Nimble Hands behind him, but it was already too late. Chu Ao let out a blood-curdling scream as he was stabbed by a Nimble Hand. Fortunately, the Lurker's attack wasn't high, and To Place One's Pride's equipment wasn't weak either. To Place One's Pride only lost a third of his health. To Place One's Pride landed on the ground and immediately rolled forward to dodge. Seeing that To Place One's Pride was about to escape, Nimble Hands was unwilling to let him escape. Hence, Nimble Hands bent down slightly and chased after To Place One's Pride at an extremely fast speed. To Place One's Pride, however, slammed both his arms against the ground. He extended both his legs and kicked at the Nimble Hands that were chasing after him. Bang! To Place One's Pride's feet landed solidly on his Nimble Hand, sending him stumbling back a few meters. A quarter of his HP bar fell from his head. It cannot be helped. A Grandmaster of Combat's ATK was not much higher than a Lurker's. Moreover, To Place One's Pride did not use any skills. It was still far from enough to kill Nimble Hands with a single kick. But just this move really surprised Dexterous Hands and the rest of the Dark Moon team. Meow. Even a little brat had such a move. It seemed that this motley crew was able to slaughter their way into the professional league not only because they hugged someone's thigh, but also because they had some tricks up their sleeves. Thieves were originally a wretched and sneak attack profession, and lurkers were even more so. Nimble Hands knew that the kid in front of him wasn't weak. He might not be able to gain the upper hand if he fought him head-on. Hence, he once again used stealth and disappeared into thin air. To place one's pride, once again leaned against the wall vigilantly. Throw a stone to find the way. Nimble Hands quietly touched the left side of To Place One's Pride. With a wave of his hand, To Place One's Pride threw a stone to the right side of Place One's Pride. Throw a stone to find the way was originally a skill used by lurkers to attract aggro from monsters. It did not have a forceful absorption function like a shield warrior's taunt. However, To Place One's Pride was now tense. Seeing a stone suddenly jump out from the right side, his body reflexively punched it. To Place One's Pride once again revealed his back. At the same time, Nimble Hands raised the dagger in his hand and aimed it at To Place One's Pride's waist. Poochie. This stab was a critical hit. To Place One's Pride only had less than a fifth of his health left. Toxic Flying Dagger. Without waiting for To Place One's Pride to turn around, Nimble Hands took out a green flying dagger dart and threw it at To Place One's Pride's buttocks. The damage value floated up again. To Place One's Pride's health bar turned into a layer of HP. At the same time, he was poisoned and turned green. To Place One's Pride angrily turned around and threw a punch. Meanwhile, Nimble Hands wretchedly ran backward. To Place One's Pride chased for a few steps before his health bar was emptied. He turned into a white light and disappeared from the arena. Dark Moon team scored another point. 1v2. Big Hands, good job. Seeing that their teammate defeated Mingjian Daoxue and To Place One's Pride, Dark Moon team's fighting spirit rose again. The dejection from being shaved was swept away. Sure enough, the opponents were a bunch of paper tigers. I'm sorry, Bai Ao, who was kicked off the stage, looked gloomy. Xuanjin team members quickly came up to comfort him. It's okay. After all, the opponent is a professional player. It's already good that you can fight like this. Wang Yu was puzzled. You scums also know how to comfort your teammates. One must know that with the style of Xuanjin, it was already good enough that they didn't press To Place One's Pride to the ground and step on them. Of course, Xuanjin team members said righteously, teammates are family. He has already lost. How can we bear to step on him again? That makes sense. Wang Yu nodded in agreement. Bullsh *T. At this time, Wu Ji said coldly, the second round is randomly selected. These bastards have a certain chance of being kicked off. No wonder. Wang Yu came to a realization. They didn't kick him when he was down because they didn't want to kick him when he was down. As expected, they were a bunch of cowards. As they spoke, the contestant for the third round was summoned to the arena. This time, it was Exquisite Dream. It's an archer. It's over. Nimble Hands is going to get a triple kill this time. Seeing Exquisite Dream enter the arena, the audience could not help but mourn for her. As the class with the longest range in Rebirth, the archer's weakness was quite obvious. It was pitifully low HP. Stealth could turn invisible, so the archer's vision and shooting range were basically useless. Coupled with the assassin's unique high attack, it could be said to be the archer's greatest nemesis. If Exquisite Dream's opponent was an assassin, it would be fine. Traps could be used to restrict the opponent's movements. However, Nimble Hands was a stealth. His keen talent allowed him to see through traps. Against such an opponent, Exquisite Dream had almost no chance of winning. The match began. His Nimble Hands quickly entered stealth. Exquisite Dream was not idle either. She quickly moved to the bottom of the wall and set up a circle of traps around herself. Then, she summoned her pet tiger. Hee. Seeing Exquisite Dream's actions, Nimble Hands smiled. He avoided the traps and arrived beside Exquisite Dream. He raised his hand and stabbed his dagger into Exquisite Dream's neck. After being stabbed by Nimble Hands, Exquisite Dream's HP dropped by half. At this time, Exquisite Dream's pet tiger pounced over with a roar. Test the waters. His nimble hands unhurriedly threw a stone not too far away, and Exquisite Dream's tiger was immediately attracted to it. At the same time, nimble hands stabbed Exquisite Dream's waist. The tragic Exquisite Dream was sent out of the arena without being able to fight back. Chapter 1236 1v3. This time, the audience in the arena cried out in surprise. 1v3 was not uncommon, but it was extremely rare in the professional arena. After all, the professional masters were the masters who played each profession to the peak. How could they be defeated by 1v3 so easily? Moreover, the defeated 1v3 was the motley team known for being shameless. Although the Dark Moon team was also quite shameless, the shamelessness of these guys only existed in challenging amateurs. It was nothing compared to the guys from Chuanjin. Now that they saw the motley team from Chuanjin being defeated 1v3, the audience cheered in their hearts. Even their impression of the Dark Moon team was much better. On the arena, his dexterous hand flicked the dagger and made a flashy pose. In any case, being able to achieve a 1v3 record in the professional arena was enough for him to brag for a lifetime. Chuanjin was a little depressed. Damn, this is an unlucky year. We have been defeated 3 times in a row. If we continue to be defeated in the 4th game, everyone will have to beat up Wuji. F***CK, let fate decide. As everyone knew, the scoring method for the 2nd game was different from the other 2 games. The other 2 games were based on the number of people killed, but the 4th game was not only based on the killing points, but also the head count points. If Dexterous defeated the entire field with a 1v5, in addition to the 5 killing points, the remaining 5 people from the Dark Moon team would be counted as head count points. In this way, the Dark Moon team would overtake the Motley team by 10-5. Facing everyone's anger, Wuji spread his hands helplessly. What can I do? I'm also very desperate. If God doesn't help us, what else can I do? Brother Chun, come and pray. It seems that only I can save you all. Chun Xiang was ordered in the face of danger. He sighed and drew a cross on his chest with his right hand. Then he put his palms together and chanted every year, "The 3 pure Taoist masters above, Confucius and Buddha rest in peace, eat the grapes without spitting the grape skin, amen." Chun Xiang's prayer had always been widespread. This time, he didn't know which deity was touched. After the 4th round of selection, a white light flashed in the team, and Yang Na was teleported to the arena. Seeing the 4th contestant of the motley team on the arena, the audience couldn't help but laugh gloatingly. Damn, it's an archer again. Is this group of shameless guys getting their retribution? Ha! Ha! Who asked them to be shameless? Serves you right. When the members of the Dark Moon battle team saw Yang Na, who was holding a crossbow in her hand, they couldn't help but laugh. They had to admit that luck was also a part of strength. When Dexterous Hands saw another archer jump out from the opposite side, he was overjoyed and couldn't help but become excited. Damn it, another archer. Could it be that the heavens are looking out for me and want me to fight for it once? On the other hand, Yang Na was calmly playing with the crossbow in her hand, like a killer checking a gun. The match began. Following the system notification, his nimble hand once again disappeared into thin air. Holding the dagger upside down, he walked toward Yang Na. However, Yang Na's reaction made Nimble Hand's eyelids twitch. In the previous 2 battles, the opponent's first reaction was to retreat and lean against the wall when they saw Yang Na's nimble hand turn invisible. However, Yang Na didn't move this time. She was still calmly playing with the crossbow in her hand. As a professional expert, Nimble Hands naturally had high tactical attainments. Seeing Yang Na's method of dealing with the enemy, Nimble Hands was secretly alarmed. Could it be a trap? Then, his nimble hands looked down at Yang Na's feet. There were no mechanisms, no traps. At this time, Nimble Hands came to a conclusion. Deliberately mystifying things. Since there were no mechanisms or traps, Nimble Hands naturally had nothing to fear. With a cold snort, he activated swift movement. His figure turned into a phantom as he rushed towards Yang Na. Just as Nimble Hands was about to approach Yang Na's eyes suddenly tightened, and she raised the crossbow in her hand. Wong! Along with the sound of a bowstring, a thick arrow flew out with a white light, flying head-on towards the Nimble Hand that was rushing over. Shock arrow! Bang! Under everyone's shocked gazes, Yang Na's crossbow hit Nimble Hand's crossbow. Nimble Hands was directly forced back a few steps, revealing his original form. At the same time, a mosquito coil floated above his head, and he was stunned on the spot. How is this possible? Nimble Hands, who was stunned, had a dumbfounded expression on his face. The audience was also dumbfounded. Since when did archers have the talent of keen sense? They could actually detect stealth. Before anyone could react to what was going on, Yang Na raised her hand and put a mark on her dexterous hand. The function of an archer's mark was similar to that of a priest's holy mark. They both marked invisible targets. The only difference was that the target marked by the archer would receive increased damage. After marking Nimble Hand, Yang Na calmly raised her crossbow, took aim, and fired. A kill shot landed on Nimble Hand's eye. Pooh! The arrow passed through the back of Nimble Hand's head, and a critical damage floated up above his head. To place one's pride kicked Nimble Hands. Nimble Hands' health was already low. Now that he was hit by Yang Na's snipe, his health dropped to a quarter. At this critical moment, Nimble Hands was stunned and immediately activated Vanish. Then, he dashed towards Yang Na. Archers were basically useless as long as they were in close combat. At this moment, Nimble Hands was only 10 meters away from Yang Na. The 3 seconds of invincibility was enough for Nimble Hands to rush to Yang Na's side. After arriving behind Yang Na, Nimble Hands raised his dagger and stabbed it into Yang Na's waist. But Yang Na seemed to have eyes behind her. She twisted her legs and twisted her body into a strange posture, dodging Nimble Hand's stab. Immediately after, Yang Na pulled out a crossbow arrow from her quiver and stabbed it into Nimble Hand's other eye socket. Pooh! After a bone-chilling sound, Dexterous Hand's 2 eyes were blinded, and everything in front of him turned black. Yang Na kicked Dexterous Hand's body and retreated a few meters back, distancing herself from Dexterous Hand. At the same time, she raised her crossbow and released several arrows, turning Dexterous Hand's blind eyes into white light. In an instant, the arena was quiet. Only the sound of the audience sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard. No class's restraint was absolute. In the professional arena, it wasn't like everyone hadn't seen an archer kill a lurker. The reason why everyone was so frightened was because of Yang Na's counterattack. Damn it, shooting the opponent's eyes was one thing, but Yang Na's final shot at the opponent's eyes was extremely cruel. The audience felt the pain in their eyes, even though they were separated by a dimension. Although this was just a game, there wasn't much difference between the holographic world and the real world. This kind of attack left an obvious shadow on the opponent. Chapter 12:37. As for the members of the Dark Moon battle team, needless to say, when their Dexterous Hand were transferred off the stage, they still covered their eyes with both hands and wailed loudly, thinking that they were blind. F***CK. Looking at the Dexterous Hands, everyone in the Dark Moon battle team shuddered. Everyone in the 9 Regions battle team looked at the 5 lakes and 4 seas at the same time. Their eyes clearly said, "Isn't such a cruel woman the scariest in Chuanjin?" Wu Hu Si-hai muttered to himself in a daze, "I didn't expect that there would be such an existence in Chuanjin." Everyone was still in shock. The second player of the Dark Moon team had also been sent to the arena. This time, it was none other than the sorcerer of the Dark Moon team, Zhuge Xiaoyu. As a long-range physical profession, archers had a much longer range than mages. Archers with agility had a higher critical hit rate, so they were relatively more effective against mages with weak physical defense. In a PK between a mage and an archer, the first thing to do was to close the distance and ensure that the opponent was within their shooting range. Therefore, after the competition began, Zhuge Xiaoyu was afraid that Yang Na would pull away from her and kite her. So, without saying anything, she flashed toward Yang Na. However, Yang Na did not move at all, just like the previous round. Seeing Zhuge Xiaoyu suddenly appear not far from her, Yang Na raised her crossbow and shot. Buzz! Hum! Two bolts flew toward Zhuge Xiaoyu one after the other. Zhuge Xiaoyu was a professional master. Naturally, she would not stand there and wait for others to shoot at her. After she landed and blinked, she immediately began to move her body left and right, condensing her magic and not giving Yang Na a chance to aim at her. Bang! But at this moment, Yang Na's first arrow flew over and coincidentally hit Zhuge Xiaoyu's right cheek, making a terrifying sound. So accurate. Zhuge Xiaoyu was shocked after being shot. She quickly shook her head to the left. Bang! Another arrow was shot at Zhuge Xiaoyu's left cheek. The two arrows were on Zhuge Xiaoyu's cheeks symmetrically. Hiss! How vicious! The audience sucked in a breath of cold air again. No matter what, Zhuge Xiaoyu was still a girl. Wasn't it purposely disfiguring her by shooting arrows at her face? Damn you! Zhuge Xiaoyu was about to cry. Why did she have to shoot at her face? Why did she have to make things difficult for other women? Not only was Zhuge Xiaoyu depressed, but Yang Na was also dumbfounded. She thought to herself, I just shot two arrows casually. Is there a need to be so shameless to receive them? Is there something wrong with this woman? While he was distracted, Zhuge Xiaoyu had finished gathering her magic. She raised her staff and threw an icicle. It was just a mere icicle. Yang Na did not take it to heart and was about to continue forward. At this time, the icicle that was flying in midair suddenly exploded and split into 10, flying towards Yang Na in a row. Yang Na unhurriedly took out a few crossbow bolts from her quiver. With a wave of her hand, the bolts flew towards the icicles. Bang! 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 The arrows collided with the icicles, and clouds of blue, icy mist exploded in midair. Zhuge Xiaoyu was dumbfounded. What the F***CK? Is that even possible? Actually, using arrows to explode magic was not a very smart move in the eyes of professional archers. After all, the system had shooting assistance, and any expert player would be able to hit their target 100% of the time. However, the arrows that Yang Na used to shoot magic were not shot with a crossbow. Instead, she threw them with her hands. This kind of move was unheard of. Of course, what Zhuge Xiaoyu did not know was that in Yang Na's eyes, shooting magic was much easier with her hands than with a crossbow. Just as Zhuge Xiaoyu was stunned, Yang Na rushed to Zhuge Xiaoyu's side at an extremely fast speed. Before Zhuge Xiaoyu could react, Yang Na's crossbow was already pressed against Zhuge Xiaoyu's temple. Bang! Concussive shot. Zhuge Xiaoyu's body swayed and froze on the spot. Yang Na lifted Zhuge Xiaoyu by the collar with her left hand and pressed the crossbow against Zhuge Xiaoyu's stomach with her right hand. Zhuge Xiaoyu was just a fragile sorcerer. How could she withstand such an attack? Before the mosquito coil on her head disappeared, she was already knocked out of the arena. F***CK. 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 This scene made the audience's blood boil. Why did the majority of players prefer to play the warrior and assassin classes? Wasn't it because these two classes were the most brutal and hot-blooded players could experience the most primitive barbarism and the most hot-blooded passion? In comparison, archers and sorcerers were much worse. After all, one relied on point attacks while the other relied on special effects. One could not feel the thrill of close combat at all. However, Yang Na did it on the arena. It was the first time everyone saw an archer fighting in close combat with a crossbow, especially when Yang Na pressed the crossbow against her opponent's head to attack. It was an indescribable feeling of exhilaration. They did not even notice that Yang Na had already taken on two enemies at once, and she was still unscathed. Tisk, tsk, tisk. To place one's pride pointed at Yang Na on the arena and sighed. He asked, do you guys think Sister Na is a violent maniac? An archer pointing at someone's head and firing. What do you know? Wuji said. Do you know how to guarantee a 100% accuracy? No. To place one's pride shook his head. Idiot. Everyone despised. Of course it's to point the muzzle at the target. As they spoke, the third member of the Dark Moon battle team was teleported to the arena. The third member of the Dark Moon battle team was called Dark Moon Hunter. As the name suggested, this person was an archer. Dark Moon Hunter was as slender as ordinary archer players. This way, it was not easy to be hit by the opponent. In the hands of Dark Moon Hunter, there was a giant blue bow. The bow exuded a faint purple glow. It was an epic artifact. Glancing at her opponent, Yang Na's expression was still as calm as when she first entered the arena. Her cold face increased the pressure in Dark Moon Hunter's heart. It couldn't be helped. People's fear came from the unknown. From a moment Yang Na entered the arena to the moment her two teammates were brutally beaten off the stage, less than 5 minutes had passed. As for Yang Na, she only used one skill, Shock Arrow. Her strength was originally a mystery. Her face was expressionless, giving people a fear of the unknown. What was unfathomable? It was to not know how strong the opponent was, let alone what the opponent was thinking. As the match began, the prompt sounded. Dark Moon Hunter turned around and ran. The archer ran with his legs. That speed was absolutely frightening. As soon as Yang Na's first arrow was shot, Dark Moon Hunter ran to the corner of the street, turned around, and disappeared from Yang Na's sight. Archers were a wretched profession that attacked others from a safe zone. Keeping a distance from the opponent during a battle was the basic behavior of an archer, even if the opponent was also an archer. Chapter 1238. It had to be said that the Dark Moon Hunter's actions had left Yang Na at a loss. Although Yang Na was an archer, she had always been using manual mode. Without the system's shooting assistance, Yang Na's hit rate was worse than ordinary archers. Therefore, Yang Na's fighting style was more inclined towards close-range combat. In the minds of ordinary players, the first thing they would do when encountering an archer was to avoid being kite. Therefore, in the first 2 rounds, Yang Na didn't need to move at all. When the opponent saw that Yang Na was an archer, they would naturally approach her and let her kill them. However, in the 3rd round, Yang Na's opponent was an archer. Naturally, the opponent would instinctively pull away from Yang Na. This way, Yang Na's advantage in combat became a disadvantage. After all, without the system's assistance, Yang Na would be at a disadvantage when facing a long-range opponent. However, the Dark Moon Hunter didn't seem to want to face Yang Na head-on, nor did he have any intention of shooting at her from a distance. After all, in the eyes of the Dark Moon Hunter, Yang Na was an archer. If she was so fierce in close combat, wouldn't it be suicidal to shoot at her from a distance? What the Dark Moon Hunter needed to do now was to find a place to hide. As long as he could quietly hide for 30 minutes, he would be able to replace Yang Na. Exchanging the weak for the strong, a 1-to-1 victory was still a win. As long as Yang Na, the tough nut to crack, was replaced, the rest of the battle would be won. The competition wasn't just about skills, but also the control of the battlefield and IQ. The city's streets weren't small. With so many streets, it wasn't difficult to hide for 30 minutes. The Dark Moon Hunter was also a professional archer. Hiding and sniping were his specialties. Playing hide-and-seek was a piece of cake. Seeing the Dark Moon Hunter disappear, Yang Na didn't move. Instead, she stood still and waited for the opponent to attack. The direction of the arrow was very easy to determine. If the Dark Moon Hunter dared to attack Yang Na would be able to determine the Dark Moon Hunter's location. However, Yang Na stood in place for a long time and didn't see the opponent attack her. The audience could clearly see that the Dark Moon Hunter had run to the opposite corner of the map and hid. Seeing this scene, the audience could only sigh at the cycle of karma. Successful people had their own ways, but shameless people were surprisingly similar. Once upon a time, this was how the motley crowd battle team drove the Grandmasters of Combat Don't Cry battle team crazy. At this time, Yang Na also realized what her opponent was thinking. After pondering for a moment, she spread her wings and floated in the air. The ancients had a poem, "If you want to see 1,000 miles, you must go to the next level." Yang Na wasn't just going up a level, she was going up to heaven. As Yang Na flew higher and higher, she had a panoramic view of the entire map. Naturally, the Dark Moon Hunter, hiding in the corner, could not escape her eyes. He, Yang Na couldn't help but smile when she saw how the Dark Moon Hunter's drill didn't seem to care at all. Then, she flew toward the Dark Moon Hunter's head. At this time, the Dark Moon Hunter was squatting in the corner, looking around. In the end, he was still a professional expert. From this angle, he only needed to look forward to see the situation in front of him, and he could escape at any time. However, what the Dark Moon Hunter didn't expect was that Yang Na could fly, and she came from above. While the Dark Moon Hunter was focused on observing, Yang Na had already flown above the Dark Moon Hunter's head. "Hey, what are you doing?" Yang Na held back her laughter and lightly kicked the back of the Dark Moon Hunter's head. "Lower your voice." The Dark Moon Hunter hurriedly waved his hand and whispered, "Don't let others find out, huh?" Speaking up to this point, the Dark Moon Hunter's pupils contracted. He abruptly turned his head, only to see Yang Na standing behind him with an expressionless face. The crossbow in her hand was already aimed at his head. Damn! The Dark Moon Hunter was shocked. He hastily dodged forward, and at the same time, knocked an arrow and turned around to shoot. Yang Na leaned to the side and reached out to catch the Dark Moon Hunter's arrow. Then, she took a step forward and chased after the Dark Moon Hunter. With a backhand grip, she stabbed the arrow into the Dark Moon Hunter's neck artery. Seeing this, the audience felt a chill on their necks and exclaimed, "Damn, how violent!" Fortunately, the damage of an arrow held in her hand wasn't high. Even so, the Dark Moon Hunter was frightened to death when his neck artery was pierced. In a moment of desperation, the Dark Moon Hunter raised the longbow in his hand and smashed it towards Yang Na's head. Forcing the archer to engage in close combat with her, Yang Na had committed a great sin. Unfortunately, the Dark Moon Hunter was a standard, ordinary person. No matter how good an archer was, he was at least to place one's pride's match in close combat. Seeing the Dark Moon Hunter swing his longbow, Yang Na calmly shifted her feet and dodged to the side. At the same time, she raised her hand and pulled the trigger of the crossbow. Whoosh! A crossbow arrow flew out. The two were only 2 meters apart. At this distance, Yang Na's archery was quite accurate. Bang! The crossbow bolt hit the Night Hunter's head without missing its target. The Dark Moon Hunter was shocked. As if he was addicted to close combat, the longbow in his hand swung even harder. Yang Na used her footwork and leisurely dodged the Dark Moon Hunter's attacks. With every step she took, she raised her hand and fired an arrow. The health bar on the Dark Moon Hunter's head decreased by a notch. How much health could a fragile archer have? After a few steps, the Dark Moon Hunter's health bar was depleted and he died. It was quite pitiful. A dignified professional archer only shot 1 arrow in a match. The rest of the time, he was fighting with his life on the line. If Yang Na had been beaten to death by him in this match, he would have been worthy of being called a true warrior. But now, he could only be called an idiot. The Night Hunter had become a big joke in everyone's hearts. Close combat archer? He must be addicted to reading novels. In the blink of an eye, another 3 matches had passed. The advantage that Yang Na's dexterous hands had already been recovered by herself. On the field, Yang Na was still calmly playing with the crossbow in her hand. Her calm expression and disdainful posture had become a beautiful scenery in the eyes of the audience. She was a living example of a female martial god. The masters of various professions also focused on Yang Na. In the Sky Dragon squad, Lei Gong looked at Yang Na, who had won 3 matches in a row, and said with a grin, "I only knew that this girl had a long shooting range, but I didn't expect her close combat to be so good." Ningjing Ziyuan smiled and said, "How is it? You won't lose against her, right?" "Are you kidding me?" Lei Gong said, "I'm a shield warrior. Can she shoot through my shield alone?" The Dark Moon squad was also unlucky in these 3 matches. They were all fragile professions. If the Dark Moon squad had a shield warrior in the next match, I'm afraid she wouldn't be so successful. Hey! Chapter 1239. Shield warriors ranked second among all classes in physical defense, second only to Guardian Knights. However, shield warriors had specialized shield skills and shield proficiency. So, in terms of tanks, shield warriors were the undisputed number 1. Moreover, shield warriors had an absolute advantage against archers. After level 20, sharpshooters could learn armor break. No matter how thick the armor was, it was useless against an archer. However, a shield was a weapon, not a piece of armor. It could completely block an archer's arrows. Even someone as strong as Yin Lao Air's Divine God shield could block 2 waves of archers without any pressure. Although the shield in Drifting Soul Darkmoon's hand was not necessarily better than Yin Lao Er's, it was still a top-grade shield. It was more than enough to block Yang Na's arrows. As for Yang Na's melee combat, shield warriors were also warriors. How could a warrior lose to an archer in melee combat? So, when Drifting Dark Moon stepped onto the stage, everyone in Team Dark Moon's team suddenly felt alive. Meow. That girl on the stage had been arrogant for so long. This time, she was finally finished. Drifting Dark Moon was brimming with confidence. He had lost so miserably last time. This time, he would definitely get back at her. However, Drifting Dark Moon was a fellow with a cheap mouth. No matter who he was facing, he would provoke them. The shadow of being tortured by evildoers run wild had yet to dissipate. After seeing Yang Na, his mind floated, and his mouth began to be cheap again. As soon as the match began, Drifting Dark Moon smiled and hooked his finger at Yang Na, saying, "Hey, little sister, seeing how beautiful you are, I can't bear to hit you. How about I let you make one move first?" Yang Na looked Drifting Dark Moon up and down and said, "Were you tortured to death in the previous match?" After mingling with Chuanjin for so long, Yang Na was very familiar with the basics of hitting people in the face and exposing their shortcomings. Damn! Hearing Yang Na expose his sore spot, Drifting Dark Moon immediately became unhappy. He pointed at Yang Na and said, "You little girl, you're not cute at all." Oomph. Yang Na coldly snorted and said, "Cut the crap. I'll let you make one move first." Really? Drifting Soul Dark Moon was overjoyed. In that case, I won't hold back. As he spoke, Drifting Soul Dark Moon raised his shield, lowered his head, and charged towards Yang Na. Hee. Just as Dark Moon was about to slam into her, Yang Na smiled faintly and used evasion. She flashed behind Dark Moon and raised her foot, stepping on the back of Dark Moon's knee. Drifting Soul Dark Moon lost his balance and stumbled forward. At the same time, Yang Na aimed her crossbow at the back of Drifting Soul Dark Moon's head and fired a concussive shot. Buzz! The huge thrust of concussive shot pushed Dark Moon's head. Dark Moon, who was already unstable, was shot to the ground. At the same time, a circle of mosquito coils rose from his head. Without saying a word, Yang Na stepped forward and stepped on Drifting Soul Dark Moon's back. She pointed the crossbow at the back of Drifting Soul Dark Moon's head and began to charge. Bang! There was a loud noise. Profound skill, storm of rose flowers. An arrow with a white light shot at the back of Drifting Soul Dark Moon's head. As the skill description said, suddenly like an arrow in the spring wind, thousands of pear blossoms bloom. Poor Drifting Soul Dark Moon. After eating a full set of awakening, the health bar on his head dropped by half. It was fine if he was pressed to the ground by a burly man, but to be bullied by a girl like this, Drifting Soul Dark Moon, still had some pride. Huh! The enraged Drifting Soul Dark Moon let out a roar and flipped over. Evildoers Run Wild was a grandmaster of combat and had a grab skill. It was easy for him to press a shield warrior to the ground. However, Yang Na was an archer after all. She did not have any skills with high priority. With normal attacks, how could she be Drifting Soul Dark Moon's opponent? Drifting Soul Dark Moon suddenly turned over and directly threw Yang Na off. Then, Drifting Soul Dark Moon rolled back and stood up. At the same time, Yang Na also did a beautiful somersault and landed smoothly. Grandson, after getting up, Drifting Soul Dark Moon pointed at Yang Na and used taunt. Yang Na was involuntarily sucked to Drifting Soul Dark Moon's side. In the blink of an eye, Drifting Soul Dark Moon used Shield Bash on Yang Na's head. Seeing this, Yang Na lightly jumped back, dodging Drifting Soul Dark Moon's Shield Bash. Then, she stretched out her hand and pressed on the edge of Drifting Soul Dark Moon's shield. At this time, Drifting Soul Dark Moon suddenly retracted his shield. Yang Na pressed on the shield and jumped, directly jumping behind Drifting Soul Dark Moon. She raised her crossbow and pulled the trigger, shooting an arrow at the back of Drifting Soul Darkmoon's head. Drifting Soul Darkmoon was shocked and quickly turned around. However, shield warriors are the clumsiest of all the classes. As soon as Drifting Soul Darkmoon lifted his foot, Yangna knew that this kid was going to turn around, so she followed Drifting Soul Darkmoon's foot. When the clumsy shield warrior, Drifting Darkmoon, turned around, the agile archer, Yangna, naturally turned around like a shadow. Yeah. Seeing that there was no one behind him, Drifting Soul Darkmoon was shocked. Duan. At this time, Yangna's arrow hit Drifting Soul Darkmoon's head. F***CK. Drifting Soul Darkmoon also reacted at this time. He had been possessed by Yangna. His left hand pulled out a one-handed sword and swung it behind him. Yangna's petite figure was like a painting stuck to Drifting Soul Darkmoon's back. As Drifting Soul Darkmoon tilted to the side, Drifting Soul Darkmoon's one-handed sword missed. Duan. Yangna raised her crossbow again and shot another arrow at the back of Drifting Soul Darkmoon's head. Just like that, Yangna relied on her agility advantage to stand behind Drifting Soul Darkmoon. No matter how Drifting Soul Darkmoon jumped up and down, Yangna was like Drifting Soul Darkmoon's shadow. Of course, the crossbow in Yangna's hand was not idle. She pressed against Drifting Soul Darkmoon's head and continuously fired arrows, whittling away Drifting Soul Darkmoon's health bar. Team Motley Bunch won. The score of the second match was even. 1v4. Yangna alone took down 4 matches without taking any damage. Seeing this, the audience went wild. They shouted, 1v5, 1v5, Mother asterisk Kerr. Everyone in Team Darkmoon felt like they were under pressure. Meow. Look at the attitude of the audience. If it wasn't for the little girl in the arena saying spray him to death, they probably wouldn't be able to leave the arena alive. They had seen cheerleaders shouting slogans, but they had never seen such pressure. Ningjing Ziyuan also looked at Lei Gongzi with a smile and said, Little Lei, what do you think? That shield warrior just now wasn't weak either. Oof. Lei Gongzi looked at Ningjing Ziyuan arrogantly and said, I'm not talking to you. Chapter 1240. Under everyone's anticipation, the last player of the Dark Moon battle team was also sent to the arena. This player was tall and burly. He obviously had a tank's body, but he was holding a staff in his hand, which gave people a kind of contrast cuteness. His name was also very funny. It was called Sima Dazhuang. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a set with Zhuge Xiaoyu just now. Oh no, they were a pair. I accidentally blurted out another sentence. I'm really a genius. How to put it, it was quite a pain in the ass for a mage to encounter such an opponent. Warriors and archers, no matter what, everyone had their own roles. They were either long-range or melee professionals. Even if they couldn't beat Yangna, they could at least fight. When a mage encountered Yangna, they were afraid of being kite if they were too far away. If they were too close, it was better to stay away. Seeing that his warriors and melee fighters were knocked out of the arena, Sima Dazhuang's mood at this time could be imagined. After going on stage, Sima Dazhuang simply closed his eyes to cater to the audience's mentality and directly surrendered. In the second match, the mob defeated the Dark Moon battle team with a score of 7-3. At this time, the Dark Moon battle team and Xuanjin battle team were 9 points apart. In other words, in the third match, the Dark Moon battle team could only narrowly win if they eliminated Xuanjin battle team without any injuries. The battle had developed to this point, and it was completely out of the control of the Dark Moon battle team. Unknown Death Dark Moon didn't expect it. Most of the people present didn't expect that the mob, a team that had always been famous for being cheap, actually had such a strong player. Especially Yangna, who had just completed the feat of 1 versus 5. At this time, in everyone's mind, the limelight seemed to have overshadowed the cold-faced Cold Spear and ice-cold Jade from 2 days ago. The audience couldn't help but discuss. What's going on this year? Why are there so many female masters? When the pro players saw the strength displayed by the motley crew, they felt the pressure in their hearts. Meow, we are a group of professional players. If we're defeated by such a group of wild foxes, Our reputation will most likely be ruined in the future. Of course, the most pressured was the Dark Moon battle team in the lounge, who was preparing for the last match. After losing so badly in the first 2 games, the Dark Moon battle team was also beaten by the Motley Crew to wake up. Although the battle situation was not optimistic and the probability of losing the match was also very high, this group of guys was quite unyielding and did not raise the white flag to surrender. It couldn't be helped. This was a professional arena. A team of professional players challenging an amateur team and then surrendering in the end was absolutely not allowed. How are we going to fight the third match? The Dark Moon battle team players in the lounge were overwhelmed by this heavy question. The captain, Dark Moon, was silent for a long time. He finally said, "The choice of the third scenario is in our hands. I think it's time to use that scenario. But isn't that supposed to be used when we meet the 9 States battle team?" The members of the Dark Moon battle team couldn't help but ask when they heard Death Dark Moon's words. 9 Provinces team? Dark Moon snorted and said, "If we don't use it in this match, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to use it in the future. Do you want to lose to the top team in the country or to a bunch of amateurs?" No one said anything. After all, such a multiple-choice question was not difficult to choose. Death Dark Moon saw that everyone was silent, so he said, "Okay." Since no one had any objections, then it was decided. For this match, give it your all, or else we'll have to go home. Do you hear me? Yes. Everyone replied loudly. Then, the lounge returned to a dead silence. This was because everyone knew that this was a professional arena. Every opponent was not simple. Even if they used that scenario in the team competition, who could guarantee a complete victory? At the same time, in the lounge of Chuanjin's group, Mingdu was holding a disposable paper cup and leaning against the wall, squinting his eyes to eavesdrop. Wang Yu asked curiously, "Old Li, what are they howling about next door? Did you hear it clearly?" Mingdu casually rolled the paper cup into a ball and threw it into the trash can. They didn't say anything. They should be mourning for their failure. Tisk tsk. Very self-aware. What were you doing earlier? Everyone looked down on him. Oof. At this moment, Wuji snorted and said, "Don't be too proud. They're professional players after all. If it weren't for Old Cow and the others, we wouldn't have been able to fight until now." After being ridiculed by Wuji, everyone lowered their heads and kept quiet. That was true. Professional players were professional players. Even if it was a second-tier team, amateurs couldn't compare to them. This was something everyone admitted. Then, Wuji asked again, "Do you know why they didn't surrender in the third match? Could it be because they're masochists?" To place one's pride asked. Bullsh *T. Wuji said, "Do you think it's you? They were the ones who chose the map for the third match." So what? It's just a map. We have Uncle Nyo. What's there to be afraid of? Isn't that right, Uncle Nyo? To place one's pride smiled as he tried to curry favor with Wang Yu. Beside him, Evildoers Run Wild slapped him on the leg. To place one's pride, stroked his hair like a cat. You only have Uncle Nyo? Yes. There's also Uncle Demon. To place one's pride, quickly added. Hee hee, little brat. Wuji rolled his eyes at to place one's pride and said, "As the saying goes, the right time, the right place, and the right people." A group battle is different from a solo battle. These 3 factors can determine the outcome of the battle. The right time can be ignored. They're obviously not as good as us in terms of people, so they will definitely find a way to win. We must be careful not to fall into their trap. Don't worry. Wang Yu patted Wuji's shoulder and said, "Let's just find a place to hide. We are in the lead now anyway." Sigh. Wuji shook his head and said, "If they dare to fight the third match, they're definitely not afraid of us wasting time." 10 minutes later, the break time was over. Players from both sides entered the game again. The Dark Moon players began to choose the map. Death Dark Moon skillfully opened the map selection interface, found the scene he wanted to choose, and clicked confirm. At this time, the scene in the arena also began to change. Soon the scene changed. The scene chosen by Death Dark Moon was called Mage Tower. Seeing this map, everyone showed a puzzled expression. Obviously, this map was a rare scene. Perhaps only the Dark Moon players had seen it before. What made everyone even more puzzled was that this map was not big. Relatively speaking, it seemed to be a little small. Roughly speaking, it was a mage tower standing in the middle of the square, surrounded by a circle of exquisite houses. Such a scene was quite spacious. Other than the towering mage tower, the other things were no different from the arena. Logically speaking, the Dark Moon team lost so badly in the first two matches. For the third match, they should find a more complicated terrain to make up for the gap in strength between the two sides. Choosing such a simple scene was obviously asking for death. Chapter 1241. After Chuanjin's team was teleported into the arena, Wuji squinted his eyes and looked around. The highest point is the most important in such a wide-open environment. The highest point? After hearing Wuji's words, everyone turned to look at the wizard tower in the middle of the arena. How are we going to attack the people below when they're so high up? Wang Yu asked in confusion after taking a look at the wizard tower. The wizard tower was probably tens of meters tall. Even if they attacked from the top down, only archers could probably attack it. Don't worry about that, Wuji said calmly. The wizard tower is a cannon. There must be something above that can attack the people below. Otherwise, they wouldn't have chosen this map. We'll fly up and grab the highest point as soon as possible, and we'll win. That's simple? That's right. That's simple. Everyone, get ready to take off. 3, 2, 1, go. As they spoke, Wuji and the countdown ended at the same time. Chuanjin's team summoned their cloaks at the same time and leaped into the air with their wings spread. Wow! Seeing this scene, everyone was drooling. Wings were the rarest of the rarest. Currently, only professional powerhouses could afford to equip them. Of course, even if they were professional experts, they might not be like the people from the Chuanjin sect, who all had wings. When they flew together, it was a spectacular sight. The flying speed of wings was still very fast. They covered the distance of tens of meters in the blink of an eye. However, Chuanjin's team was about to reach the top of the wizard tower. Duong. At this moment, Wang Yu, who was flying at the front, seemed to have hit glass. His body swayed slightly and let out a muffled sound. Wang Yu touched the top of his head and could not help but shout, "We've reached the top. We can't fly anymore." At this moment, Chuanjin's team had also flown to Wang Yu's side and touched the top of their heads. As expected, there seemed to be an invisible wall directly above them, blocking their way. Huh? Wuji rubbed his chin and wondered, is there a barrier around this thing? However, right at this moment, the members of the Dark Moon battle team suddenly streaked past the heads of the Quan Zhun battle team, passed through the barrier, and flew up to the mage tower one by one. Everyone from Quan Zhun was stunned. These bastards clearly didn't have wings, so how could they fly so fast? How did they pass through the barrier? Gotcha. However, just when everyone was at a loss, a lightning bolt suddenly fell from the sky and landed on Wuji's head. Caught off guard, Wuji was blasted into a white light on the spot. At the same time, someone above them was shouting, "Bomb that Grandmaster Combat! Bomb that Grandmaster of Combat!" F***CK. Everyone was taken aback when they heard the voice. They hurriedly raised their heads and pressed Drifting Soul Dark Moon to block the door with their shields. The other members of the Dark Moon team behind them moved. It was Death Dark Moon who shouted, F***CK. Seeing the situation on the stage, the audience all revealed looks of contempt. Meow. This was really a competition to see who was more shameless. There was actually such a move. There was only a small room at the top of the mage tower for controlling magic attacks. The door to the room was very small, and the drifting Dark Moon shield could block the door tightly. The people inside only needed to focus on bombarding their opponents with the mage tower. This kind of strategy could be said to be shameless. "Quick hide!" Mingdu shouted when he saw this. He directly teleported to the bottom of Wang Yu's body. This guy was not stupid. He knew where to hide was the safest. However, Mingdu had just hidden himself. Boom! Another lightning bolt fell directly toward Wang Yu. Wang Yu hurriedly turned around and dodged the lightning bolt at the critical moment. The poor Mingdu was directly blasted into pieces. Huh? He didn't die from that? Death Dark Moon and the others could not help but be shocked when they saw that Wang Yu was not dead. This group of shameless people must be very familiar with this map, since they chose this map for the final scenario. As for the power of the Mage Tower's magic, they naturally knew it better than anyone else. How could he dodge it? Was he cheating? However, although the power of the Mage Tower did not kill Wang Yu, it showed the others how powerful it was. Run, run, following the order to retreat. The others in Xuanzhen immediately scattered like birds and beasts, flying in all directions. At this moment, someone in the room asked, "They are running away. Should we blow them up?" Death Dark Moon shouted, "Don't worry about the others. Kill that Grandmaster of Combat first. Use the fastest one." Boom! A loud sound rang out. A bolt of lightning that was faster than the previous 2 bolts of lightning struck towards Wang Yu. Moving in the air was not as fast as moving on the ground. When the 3rd lightning bolt fell, even Wang Yu was a little embarrassed to dodge it. Even lightning can't hit him? Death Dark Moon was confused, seeing that his magic missed. Being targeted by Death Dark Moon continuously, Wang Yu was also a little angry. He pointed at the Mage Tower and shouted, "Death Dark Moon, damn you, just you wait." After cursing, Wang Yu spread his wings and was about to rush up the Mage Tower. Death Dark Moon saw this and shouted anxiously, "Quick, quick, quick! He is coming up to kill me. Use 9th Heaven Lightning." F***CK, there is a barrier. What are you afraid of? Everyone looked at Death Dark Moon, who was scared out of his wits. Zhuge Xiaoyu, who was operating the cannon, aimed at Wang Yu and fiercely pressed the button to cast the ultimate magic. Boom! A strengthened version of the violent thunder spell, as thick as a water tank, fell from the sky and hit Wang Yu's head. Poof! Wang Yu's invincible telekinesis barrier was directly blasted out. The huge impact of the violent thunder spell immediately blasted Wang Yu from the sky to the ground. Damn, it worked! That son of a B***TCH is finally dead. The members of the Dark Moon team raised their hands in celebration, tears streaming down their faces. In the eyes of the members of the Dark Moon team, as long as Wang Yu was not there, the guys on the other side were weak. However, the Dark Moon battle team only rejoiced for 2 seconds before Wang Yu, who was under the Mage Tower, jumped up and pointed at the sky as the audience gasped in surprise. "Just you wait," she shouted. F***CK. Hearing this familiar voice, the players of the Dark Moon team were about to cry. He didn't die after taking a 9th Heaven Lightning spell. How tough is he? Boss, should we still blow him up? Zhuge Xiaoyu's hands were trembling a little. They had not fought with Wang Yu face to face, so they did not know how fierce his opponent was at first. Seeing Death Dark Moon's useless behavior, everyone was still a little disdainful. But now they understood, forget it. Looking at Wang Yu, who was still alive and kicking under the tower, Death Dark Moon sighed. Death Dark Moon had already given up on Wang Yu. Just now in midair, Wang Yu could even dodge the fastest lightning. Now that Wang Yu had landed and moved faster, how could they still hit him? If they couldn't kill this guy a few more times in a row, perhaps the confidence that they had just built up would all be gone. Chapter 1242. Wang Yu was like an immortal who was struck by lightning from the sky. He now had a basic understanding of the Mage Tower's attack. After getting up, Wang Yu activated his Qin Gong without saying a word and hid in the house at an extremely fast speed. F***CK. Seeing Wang Yu leaving a trail of afterimages in his wake, the people on the Mage Tower could not help but wonder if he was an assassin or a Grandmaster of Combat. After Wang Yu's head-on clash with the cannon turrets was fruitless, the members of the Quanjin sect gathered together again. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. The inept strategist of the team had sacrificed himself in the first wave of attack, and the vanguard of the team had pissed his pants after being struck by 3 bolts of lightning. Now, the people of Xuanzhen were filled with fear as they looked at the high and mighty cannon tower. Seeing that no one said anything, Wang Yu asked, "What do we do now?" In Wuji's absence, Chun Xiang automatically took up the role of military commander. Hearing Wang Yu's question, he rubbed his chin and said, "In my opinion, we're ahead of the other side in terms of score, so it's best for us to hide here until the end of the match." Chun-Go is right. The others agreed in unison. Damn, whoever killed the cannon tower. No one dared to rush out recklessly. Only to place one's pride looked around and said with lingering fear, Cheap Chun's words make sense, but is this place absolutely safe? To place one's pride's disappointment. Everyone's expression darkened, and they glared at to place one's pride. Why don't we beat this brat up? F***CK. To place one's pride quickly hid behind Wang Yu. Uncle Nyo, look at them. All right, stop fooling around. Wang Yu shielded to place one's pride and waved his hand. The lightning on the cannon tower has not fallen yet, so this house is quite safe. Let's hide for now and see who can last longer. To place one's pride said again, that cannon tower does not only have lightning attacks, right? Everyone was taken aback for a moment. Then, fierce expressions appeared on their faces again. To place one's pride was so frightened that he hurriedly retreated. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly rang in everyone's ears. F***CK. Who's farting? Chun Xiang pinched his nose and looked to place one's pride. When the others saw this, they all pointed at to place one's pride and said in disdain, Chick, what the hell are you talking about in the game? I'll fight it out with you. To place one's pride was enraged after being bullied again and again. He was about to go berserk, but to place one's pride had just stood up when his eyes suddenly widened. He pointed behind the crowd and said, Behind, behind. Everyone was stunned for a moment and quickly turned around, only to see a cloud of green poisonous mist floating toward them. Yang Na was the only girl in the team competition. In order not to wallow in the mire with this group of scum, Yang Na sat at the back of the team. When everyone reacted, the poisonous mist had floated to Yang Na's side. Yang Na couldn't dodge in time and was enveloped by the poisonous mist. In less than 3 seconds, she turned into a cloud of white light. F***CK. Everyone was taken aback when they saw this. They quickly got up and ran to the next room. In less than 10 seconds, the poisonous mist filled the room where everyone was hiding just now. Then it penetrated through the crack of the door. At this time, everyone also understood that this was not a fucking house at all, but a poisonous gas protective belt used for strategic defense. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but curse. Damn you. Choosing this kind of map is too shameless. Wasn't it so? In this scene, except for the poisonous gas protective belt, it was an open space at a glance. The cannon tower's attack could fall in every corner of the open space. In other words, whoever grabbed the cannon tower would win 99% of the game. Seeing the Dark Moon team's shameless style, the Chuanjin guys sighed that they found their opponents. The Chuanjin guys weren't the type to sit still and wait for death. Of course, they couldn't hold their urine to death. Under such conditions, the fierceness of this group of guys was more stimulated. Everyone coincidentally remembered Wuji's last words before his death. Their target was the cannon tower in the open space. Chun Xiang thought for a moment and said, If you want to win, you must fly to the cannon tower. Yin Lao said gloomily, I understand the reason, but even if there is no one on it, we can't pass through the barrier. Wang Yu touched his chin and muttered, Say, those bastards of the Dark Moon team can't fly. How do they jump up? Is there any specific jumping platform or something? Everyone was silent after listening to Wang Yu. Everyone was so focused on escaping just now that they actually forgot about this. In the end, they still had to be reminded by a newbie. It was really embarrassing. Chun Xiang immediately ordered, Dao Shui, Old Fish, you guys go and look around the cannon tower to see if there's a jumping platform. Okay. Ming Jian Dao Shui and Bai Ming Yoyu received the order and activated stealth to sneak out. This game scene wasn't big. The edge of the space near the cannon tower could be seen at a glance. The two circled around the cannon tower. Sure enough, on one side of the cannon tower, they saw a blue magic circle. This magic circle was only the size of a pot lid. It could only step on one person at a time. If they didn't look carefully, they really wouldn't notice it. After seeing the magic circle, Ming Jian Daoshui stood up curiously. Phew! Ming Jian Daoshui only heard the sound of the wind in his ears. Immediately after, he was bounced up and flew toward the cabin on the cannon tower. At the same time, drifting Dark Moon who had been guarding the door, noticed Ming Jiandaoxue flying up and raised a shield high. When Ming Jiandaoxue flew to the door, drifting dark moon's shield fell down. Bang! Ming Jiandaoxue was like a baseball that was hit and was directly smashed down by drifting dark moon's shield. Dom. In a state of dizziness, players would suffer double damage when falling from high altitude. Ming Jiandaoxue fell from the sky and was instantly smashed into a white light. Damn it! Seeing Ming Jiandaoxue's tragic death, everyone understood why Drifting Dark Moon was guarding the door. At this time, Drifting Dark Moon, who had killed Ming Jiandaoxue, loudly taunted the people below the cannon tower. "Ha ha! You bunch of cowards! Come up here. I'll let you have one hit." One had to admit that Drifting Dark Moon was a very aware tank. Ever since this bastard first appeared in the game, he had been constantly provoking everyone with his mouth. As Drifting Dark Moon spoke, an eye symbol suddenly appeared above the cannon tower. At the same time, Baiming Yuyu was also exposed to everyone's gazes. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck Baiming Yuyu. She dove headfirst into the ground to avoid the attack and ran back. It's Motherf asterisk her. This time, everyone finally understood the power of the cannon tower. Not only could it one-shot players, but it also had the ability to see through stealth. Moreover, the cannon tower was small. A team of players guarding it was equivalent to one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. Chapter 1243. F***CK. If the person mocking them was a super expert like Ningjing Ziyuan, Chuanjin would have tolerated it. Drifting Dark Moon had never won against Chuanjin, yet he still dared to be so arrogant. Everyone was furious. At this moment, the poisonous gas in the house had already spread to the last house. Seeing that Chuanjin was about to be wiped out by the poisonous gas, Wang Yu thought for a while and said, "I can go up, but I don't have a chi shield now. I'm afraid that their grenades will hit me." From the way Ming Jiandaoxue was shot up, it was not hard to see that players who were shot up had no autonomy in the air. If they predicted the trajectory of the grenades, even Wang Yu would not be able to escape the fate of being killed by the grenades. Well, Chun Xiang thought for a while, and then said to everyone, "Did you guys notice that their turrets can only attack one person at a time?" "Yes, I saw it." Everyone nodded. If the turrets could attack a group of people at a time, no one would be alive now. Hee hee. Chun Xiang laughed and said, "That's easy. I calculated the time between the turrets' attacks. It's 2 seconds, and it's also 2 seconds to be shot up from the turrets. This means that as long as we can attract the turret's firepower, Old Cow can take the opportunity to jump up." Everyone looked at the turrets, then at Chun Xiang, and said in unison, "That makes sense." Wang Yu sighed and said, Is this the legendary deceptive cannon?" "Yes." Chun Xiang smiled wretchedly and said, "Operation Deceptive Cannon begins now." Everyone spread out. After saying that, Chun Xiang was the first to rush out. Got it, got it." After the others received the order, they also jumped out of the house. The 5 figures ran in different directions, east, west, north, and south. Seeing the Chuanjin people jumping out of the house, Death Dark Moon immediately ordered, "Quick, attack." The rats had been blasted out by the poisonous gas. Zhuge Xiaoyu received the order and hurriedly controlled the turrets to aim at the Chuanjin people below. Chun Xiang was a cloth armor class with low defense. Running was no different from crawling. He was also a strong control player, so he was naturally the main target. Boom! A bolt of lightning fell and struck Chun Xiang's head. Chun Xiang was blasted into pieces. At the same time, Wang Yu activated his Qin Gong and dashed towards the jumping point with a mirage. Seeing Wang Yu come out, Yin Lao Air immediately stopped in his tracks. He raised his middle finger and shouted on the internet, "Grandson, look over here." The eyes of the Dark Moon battle team were directly attracted to him. Zhuge Xiaoyu's turret was also aimed at Yin Lao Air. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck Yin Lao Air. Yin Lao Air hurriedly raised his shield above his head. When the lightning struck Yin Lao Air's artifact shield, Yinlao Air immediately activated his lightning strike status. When Yinlao Air activated his lightning strike status, 80% of the damage was ineffective. He also had a number of shields. Even so, Yinlao Air's HP was directly depleted. He was only left with a sliver of HP. The damage of the turret was evident. However, this lightning bought time for Wang Yu. When the lightning struck, Wang Yu jumped onto the jumping platform. Whoosh! With a gust of wind, Wang Yu was pushed onto the turret by the jumping platform. F***CK. At this time, Drifting Dark Moon also saw Wang Yu flying up. In a panic, Drifting Dark Moon quickly raised a shield and charged up his shield attack. Wang Yu arrived in an instant. Drifting Dark Moon's shield attack was also charged up. Hey! With a roar, Drifting Dark Moon swung his shield at Wang Yu. Hee. Wang Yu smiled slightly. He turned into a white light and appeared behind Drifting Dark Moon. Drifting Dark Moon's shield attack hit the air. Fortunately, this was a game. Otherwise, he would have sprained his waist. Without waiting for Drifting Dark Moon to stabilize his balance, Wang Yu stepped on the back of Drifting Dark Moon's knee. Without looking back, he pressed his right hand backward, pressed on the back of Drifting Dark Moon's head, and pushed this kid off the turret. Ah, thud! Drifting Dark Moon landed. Drifting Dark Moon's skin was rough and thick. This fall did not kill him, but he still saw stars. Before Drifting Dark Moon could recover, to place one's pride's foot stepped on his face. Immediately after, the remaining members of the Quan Jun sect surrounded Drifting Soul Dark Moon and gave him a good beating. While beating him up, he scolded, "Who asked you to act all high and mighty? Who asked you to act all high and mighty?" The tragic Drifting Dark Moon was once again pressed to the ground and beaten into a white light. At this time, the other members of the Dark Moon team on the turret were not feeling well either. Seeing Wang Yu forcibly breaking through the turret, everyone was shocked. They raised their weapons and were about to attack Wang Yu. However, the space on the turret was too small. Wang Yu pulled Zhuge Xiaoyu into his hand to resist all the weapons. Zhuge Xiaoyu, a fragile sorcerer, was cut into pieces by his teammates on the spot and died. After tricking Zhuge Xiaoyu to death, Wang Yu stomped his foot fiercely. A circle of lightning spread out, pasting the surrounding people to the wall. Immediately afterward, Wang Yu jumped to Sima Dazhuang's side and killed 2 archers with 1 foot. Then he grabbed Sima Dazhuang's head and smashed it against the wall. Bang! Sima Dazhuang followed Zhuge Xiaoyu's footsteps. In less than 5 seconds, the Dark Moon team lost half of its members. The space in the hut was also a lot more spacious. Seeing this, the rest of the people pounced on Wang Yu again. Wang Yu narrowed his eyes and stretched his hands to the left and right. He pulled Dexter's hand and another assassin out of the air on both sides. Then, Wang Yu grabbed their heads and slammed it against each other. Bang! 2 white lights rose, and the Dark Moon team lost 2 members again. At this time, in addition to the dead Dark Moon and another knight, there was also a holy priest. The holy priest was also a scoundrel. He casually cast Sacred Fire on Wang Yu, then cast Invincibility on the knight. Then, he pounced on Wang Yu, wanting to perish together with him. Wang Yu stretched out his hand, and a long rod was fixed on the priest's chest, pushing him out of the hut. Bang! A dazzling white light burst out of the falling priest. Bang! The priest, who had only 1 drop of HP left, was smashed into a white light of death after landing. What a good double kick. At the same time, the knight, who was blessed with invincibility by the priest, directly launched charge at Wang Yu, knowing that he couldn't be hurt by Wang Yu. Wang Yu took a wrong step and avoided the charge. He jumped to the side of the dead Dark Moon who was about to attack him with a sword. He grabbed the neck of the dead Dark Moon and threw it off the turret. To place one's pride and the others below had been holding back for a long time, and they were already hungry and thirsty. As soon as the dead Dark Moon landed, the group of people released all the big moves that they had prepared. Star Meteor Slash. Yinlao Air smashed a shield on the ground, and the dead Dark Moon on the ground was shaken into the air. Army Breaking Rising Dragon Slash. Baosin took the baton and with a swing of his greatsword, the dead dark moon jumped into the sky. Yama's fatal strike. Fish in the northern sea turned into rays of death light and passed through his body. Flickering shadow, chain, kick. Finally, to place one's pride, kicked the face of the dead dark moon, ending its life. Chapter 1244. When Death Dark Moon was beaten to death by Bao San and the others, the invincibility state of the knight who confronted Wang Yu on the turret had also disappeared. Logically speaking, although the Dark Moon battle team was a second-rate battle team, their strength was still at the professional level. If they were not caught off guard by Wang Yu's sudden breakthrough, and the space in the turret could not be fully utilized, and Wang Yu cut to the back row, they would not be defeated so easily even if it was 10 against 1. This knight relied on his invincibility to open up a stance and confront Wang Yu head-on. He was somewhat powerful, but the invincibility effect was gone. He missed the ground. Wang Yu pressed his head with a few punches and kicks and threw him down from the turret. The result could be imagined. In the third match, Chuanjin annihilated the Dark Moon battle team, who had an absolute advantage, with a record of more than half of their casualties. At the same time, Wang Yu also left a deep impression on everyone. This was truly 1 versus 10 forcefully breaking through, and the opponent was even a professional master. Everyone was a game geek, and it was the first time they saw such a master. Of course, in contrast, everyone was more fearful of this scene. In such a rogue map, a turret was almost invincible. If it weren't for the fact that the Chuanjin guys had a super master like Wang Yu, they would probably be bombarded into pieces. Such a map was already a violation of the rules. Not only the audience, but even the Chuanjin people who had just left the field had a lingering fear of the battle just now. Tis, Wuji sneered, nonsense. This lousy map can only be used for a surprise attack. It won't work next time. What do you mean? Everyone was slightly taken aback when they heard that. Everyone died so miserably just now. Why did it sound like they died unjustly? Wuji said indifferently. Do you know that the cleric's invincibility skill lasts for 8 seconds? That's right. At this time, Five Lakes Four Seas also said to his men, this map is most likely meant to trap us, but the weakness of this map is also very obvious. The people are all crowded together. As long as there's a cleric in our team, we can simply pull a mage to cast an invincibility skill and jump up to release a few AoE skills. What if we can't kill all of them at once? Someone asked. Then we wait for the cooldown and throw another one up. Five Lakes, Four Seas laughed. Hearing Five Lakes, Four Seas explanation, everyone came to a sudden realization. It turned out that the seemingly invincible defense turret was actually so fragile. No wonder they were able to insta-kill the opposing cleric. The first match of the pro group, the Motley Crew, won. Following the announcement of the results of the match, Wang Yu's group walked out of the competition room and returned to their seats. This time, the audience did not boo. This was because the Motley Crew had won in a spectacular fashion. An amateur team had been picked by a professional team, and they were able to achieve an overwhelming result despite having an absolute advantage in the field. This was definitely an unprecedented match. After a short break, the teams for the second match were selected. Hades versus Starfire Battle Team. The Chuanjin people of the Netherworld King realm were relatively familiar with them. Not only had these fellows fought with the Chuanjin people, but some of them were even the idols of the Chuanjin people. But it was also true that these fellows were unlucky. Although they were strong, their tactics were terrible, and their luck was a complete mess. In normal competitions, if tactics were lacking, they could still rely on their strength to make up for it. But in the pro scene, the players weren't ruthless characters. Each and every one of them were incomparably sinister. Even a motley crew like Wang Yu had almost been killed, so it would be difficult for these fellows to rely on their strength to make up the numbers. In short, this was a team that broke people's hearts. Every time they watched a match, Wuji would say, if I were their tactician, we'd have won a dozen championships by now. Starfire Battle Team was a rising star in recent years. Their strength was just SOSO, on par with Dark Moon Battle Team. But they had a good image. They were all fresh meat, so tender that you could pinch water out of them. In this era where looks were everything, the image of these kids in the fans' hearts was second only to the embodiment of justice, Iron Ox. Although they were both second-rate teams, Starfire Battle Team had to be sponsored by their sponsors, while Dark Moon Battle Team could only be sponsored by a pirate. There was no helping it. Traffic was everything, and whoever had the most fans was the best. Who cared about their strength? This was especially true for Starfire Battle's captain, Samadhi Truefire. He was originally a celebrity in the entertainment industry, and after being packaged and hyped up by the gaming industry, he became a famous spokesperson. Half of the advertising for Rebirth was taken by this kid, and it was said that his annual endorsement fee was more than the expenses of a team. He was without a doubt the most valuable professional player in the gaming industry. Seeing that Starfire Battle Team Hades was up against, Wuji couldn't help but snort. Damn it, it's been so long since I've stepped on dog shit. Poor Hades. That's right. The others shook their heads in agreement. Had Hades always been this unlucky? They should have changed their name a long time ago. Hades, Grim Reaper, and the like, how unlucky. Hearing their words, Wang Yu's head was filled with question marks. It looks like you guys have a deep prejudice against Starfire Battle Team. Wuji said coldly. It's not just us. Look at the teams around us. Which one of them doesn't have a prejudice against them? Wang Yu looked around. As expected, although the expressions on the faces of the surrounding battle teams were not as obvious as those from the Quanjin sect, she could still sense a strong sense of hostility. After all, Starfire Battle Team was at the bottom in terms of strength, and yet they occupied more than half of the resources. Having their business stolen by a bunch of people who relied on their looks to make a living was understandable. In reality, this kind of thing was already a trend. As the author of the web novel industry, he was actually quite disdainful of this. But looks were innate, and it was also a part of one's strength. It wasn't their fault that they were handsome, but it was their fault that they judged people based on their looks. Everyone had their own hearts. The two teams entered the arena and soon appeared on the stage. The match had officially begun. The first match was up to Team Hades to choose the map. In the past, the first match would be a duel, and the map would be as small as possible. However, the Netherworld King had chosen a large map, the Watchman Island. The Overwatch Island, as the name suggested, was an island. The background story was that a war had taken place, and the island was in ruins. The ruins were the battlefield of the players. The map was filled with smoke, and there were many abandoned buildings. The field of vision wasn't wide at all. A duel like this would take at least 30 minutes, and they wouldn't even be able to find their opponent. After the two sides had chosen their players, there was a flash of white light, and two figures were teleported to opposite ends of the island. The camera gave each of them a close-up. Chapter 1245. Underworld's representative was a tall and burly man who was no less than Wang Yu. His muscles were even thicker than a tank's. If it weren't for the huge longbow he carried on his back, no one would be able to tell that he was an archer. Everyone in Chuanjin knew him. He was Hades' #1 expert, Grim Reaper's left hand. He was also Wuji's favorite pro player. Most people liked handsome men, but Wuji liked muscular men. As expected of a cultured man, even his tastes were philosophical. The camera turned to Team Skyfire. A handsome young man with a head full of red hair appeared on the screen. He had a longbow strapped to his back and looked to be an archer as well. He was Team Skyfire's main archer, Starfire. As soon as Starfire's face appeared on the screen, a wave of screams erupted from the crowd. Starfire, you can set a prairie on fire. Starfire, I want to give birth to your children. The pros and the veterans of Chuanjin were used to this sort of scene. They calmly shook their heads in disdain. The sudden screams gave Wang Yu a fright. Looking at those crazy fans, they wanted nothing more than to jump up and lick the screen. Starfire also felt the passion of his fans. He smiled and waved to the camera, revealing a charming expression. Wah! The fans' eyes were shining, and they screamed and roared. Only then did Wang Yu realize that what he'd seen at the airport was only a small spectacle. Is it really that bad? Wang Yu wiped his sweat, nudging Chun Xiang beside him. It's not just that. Chun Xiang's heart skipped a beat. There's something even crazier to come. Just wait. Wang Yu was dumbfounded. Amidst the ruckus, the match had already begun. The archers on both sides quickly moved towards the center of the map. In the center of the map was a lookout, the highest point of the map. In a battle between archers, vision was the deciding factor. Whoever held the high ground controlled the entire battlefield. As an archer, Starfire added his points to the agility system. His movement speed was extremely fast, and his movements were also quite agile. On the other hand, the Grim Reaper's left hand's pace was extremely steady. He was as slow as a tank with its shield raised. Anyone who saw him would feel anxious. When Starfire rushed to the observation deck, Death's left hand was only a third of the way there. Seeing this scene, the audience could not help but burst into laughter. Is this big guy here to be funny? Wang Yu also frowned and said, that big archer must have added a point to strength. Why is he so slow? That's right. Chun Xiang explained, look at his bow. Half of the archers can't even lift it. At this time, Starfire had completely occupied the observation deck. His field of vision from top to bottom was extremely wide. Through the smoke, Starfire could see the Grim Reaper's left hand dozens of meters away. Seeing this, Starfire coldly snorted. He knocked an arrow on his bow and aimed at the Grim Reaper's left hand. Snipe was an archer's longest range skill. After level 50, the effective range was a full 50 meters. Furthermore, it had a critical hit attribute. It was the archer's main skill to pin down the opponent from a distance. Whoosh! With a flash of light, the arrow whistled through the smoke and shot toward the Grim Reaper's left hand. Seeing that the arrow was about to hit the Grim Reaper's left hand, the Grim Reaper's left hand dodged backward. Bang! The arrow missed the target and stuck to the ground. Starfire was slightly stunned. He quickly squatted down and stared at the Grim Reaper's left hand, waiting for the skill to cool down. Due to the lack of a vantage point, the Grim Reaper's left hand's field of vision was completely blocked by the smoke. He looked at the arrow on the ground and placed his hand over his eyes to indicate the angle between him and the Starfire. Then he took out the giant bow on his back and took out a thick arrow that was slightly smaller than a knight's spear and knocked it on the bowstring. Holy shit, is that an arrow? Seeing the arrow in the Grim Reaper's left hand's hand, the audience's eyes popped out. Even Wang Yu could not help but be speechless. This kind of bow and arrow, you must have added a point to strength. Squeak! To everyone's surprise, the Grim Reaper's left hand grabbed the bowstring and pulled back hard. The giant bow was pulled into the shape of a full moon. The Grim Reaper's left hand narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. Swish! With an explosive sound, the thick arrow flew out like a rocket. Bang! The arrow hit the wall of the watchtower and directly pierced through it. The thick arrow almost brushed past Starfire's head. Starfire was so shocked that his hair stood on end. Nice! One you could not help but applaud loudly. The Grim Reaper's left hand could not see his opponent at all. He could only confirm the opponent's position by the direction of the arrow. It must be known that an archer with the system's assistance could only accurately attack targets within his field of vision. Therefore, it could be seen that the Grim Reaper's left hand used his real skills to shoot the arrow. As the saying goes, bow, sword, stone, horse stance, and sword. Archery was definitely the most important and the most difficult to learn for a martial artist. Although Wang Yu was a martial arts genius, in this situation, even if Wang Yu went on the field himself, he might not be able to do better than the Grim Reaper's left hand. He did not expect a group of gamers to produce such an expert. Nice your sister, you muscle man. However, at this moment, a wave of curses was heard. Wang Yu turned his head and saw a group of young girls in the audience staring at him angrily. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. A few girls next to them echoed, that's right, that's right. A group of violent guys using such a thick arrow. What if our star gets hurt? Muscle man, go to hell. Look at his weird outfit. Is he a fool? Wang Yu was completely dumbfounded. Wasn't the purpose of the competition to kill the opponent? How was it violent? Why should the muscle man die? Why was he stupid? What kind of logic was this? Ignore them. Seeing this, Chun Xiang tugged at Wang Yu's clothes, indicating that Wang Yu should not argue with the audience. Then, he chuckled and said, "See that? This is what I call exaggeration." Hiss! Wang Yu sucked in a breath of cold air and wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. Damn it, brainless fans are really scary. On the observation deck, Xing Fire was obviously scared out of his wits by the arrow from the Grim Reaper's left hand. He did not care if his shooting range was that far. He desperately shot arrows at the Grim Reaper's left hand, trying to suppress him with firepower. Unfortunately, Xing Fire added points to agility, so its shooting range naturally could not compare to a violent archer like the Grim Reaper's left hand. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.